This remark made the Chevalier prick up his ears, and from the moment his adversary had committed this error, his mind was so thoroughly on its guard that he seemed every moment to gain the advantage more and more, and she, consequently, to lose it. "I will admit, for argument's sake, that you obtain the money," he resumed. "You will lose twice as much, having 100,000 francs pension to receive instead of 60,000, and that for a period of 10 years. Not so, for I shall only be subjected to this reduction of my income during the period of M. Fouquet's remaining in power, a period which I estimate at 2 months. "Ah," said Aramis, "I am frank, you see. I thank you for it, Duchesse, but you would be wrong to suppose that after M. Fouquet's disgrace the order will resume the payment of your pension. I know a means of making the order pay, as I know a means of forcing the Queen Mother to concede what I require. In that case, Duchesse, we are all obliged to strike our flags to you. The victory is yours, and the triumph also. Be clement, I entreat you." "But is it possible," resumed the Duchesse, without taking notice of the irony, "that you really draw back from a miserable sum of 500,000 francs, when it is a question of sparing you, I mean your friend, I beg your pardon, I ought rather to say your protector, the disagreeable consequences which a party contest produces? Duchesse, I tell you why. Supposing the 500,000 francs were to be given you, M. Lakes will require his share, which will be another 500,000 francs, I presume, and then after M. de Lakeses and your own portions have been arranged, the portions which your children, your poor pensioners, and various other persons will require, will start up as fresh claims, and these letters, however compromising they may be in their nature, are not worth from 3 to 4 millions. Can you have forgotten the Queen of France's diamonds? They were surely worth more than these bits of waste paper signed by Mazarin, and yet their recovery did not cost a fourth part of what you asked for yourself. Yes, that is true, but the merchant values his goods at his own price, and it is for the purchaser to buy or refuse. Stay a moment, Duchesse. Would you like me to tell you why I will not buy your letters? Pray tell me. Because the letters you claim to be Mazarin's are false. What an absurdity. I have no doubt of it, for it would, to say the least, be very singular that after your quarrel with the Queen through Mazarin's means, you should have kept up any intimate acquaintance with the latter. It would look as if you had been acting as a spy. And upon my word, I do not like to make use of the word. Oh, pray do. You great complacents would seem suspicions, at all events. That is quite true, but the contents of the letters are even more so. I pledge you my word, Duchesse, that you will not be able to make use of it with the Queen. Oh, yes, indeed. I can make use of everything with the Queen. Very good, thought Aramis. Croak on, old owl, hissed Beldam Viper. But the Duchesse had said enough, and advanced a few steps towards the door. Aramis, however, had reserved one exposure which she did not expect. She was standing immediately before a large mirror, in which her decrepitude, so carefully concealed, was only made more manifest, and thereupon, without even saluting Aramis, who bowed with the ease and grace of the musketeer of early days, she hurried away with trembling steps, which her very precipitation only the more impeded. Aramis sprang across the room, like a zephyr, to lead her to the door. Madame de Chevreuse made a sign to her servant, who resumed his musket, and she left the house where such tender friends had not been able to understand each other only because they had understood each other too well. Chapter 41. Wherein may be seen that a bargain which cannot be made with one person can be carried out with another. Aramis had been perfectly correct in his supposition, for hardly had she left the house in the place bought her than Madame de Chevreuse proceeded homeward. She was doubtless afraid of being followed, and by this means thought she might succeed in throwing those who might be following her off their guard. But scarcely had she arrived within the door of the hotel, and hardly had assured herself that no one who could cause her any uneasiness was on her track, when she opened the door of the garden, leading into another street, and hurried towards the Rue Croix de Petit Champs, where M. Colbert resided. We have already said that evening, or rather night, had closed in. It was a dark, thick night besides. Paris had once more sunk into its calm, quiescent state, enshrouding alike within its indulgent mantle the high-born duchesse carrying out her political intrigue, and the simple citizen's wife, who, having been detained late by a supper in the city, was making her way slowly homewards, hanging on the arm of a lover, by the shortest possible route. Madame de Chevreuse had been too well accustomed to nocturnal political intrigues to be ignorant that a minister never denies himself, even at his own private residence, to any young and beautiful woman who may chance to object to the dust and confusion of a public office, or to old women, as full of experience as of years, who disliked the indiscreet echo of official residences. A valet received the duchesse under peristyle and received her, it must be admitted, with some indifference of manner. He intimated, after having looked at her face, that it was hardly at such an hour that one so advanced in years as herself could be permitted to disturb Monsieur Colbert's important occupations. But Madame de Chevreuse, without looking or appearing to be annoyed, wrote her name upon a leaf of her tablets, a name which had but too frequently sounded so disagreeably in the ears of Louis XIII and of the great cardinal. She wrote her name in the large, ill-formed characters of the higher classes of that period, handed it to the valet, without uttering a word, but with so haughty and imperious a gesture that the fellow, well accustomed to judge a people from their manners and appearance, perceived at once the quality of the person before him, bowed his head, and ran to M. Colbert's room. The minister could not control a sudden exclamation as he opened the paper, and the valet, gathering from it the interest with which his master regarded the mysterious visitor, returned as fast as he could to beg the duchesse to follow him. She ascended to the first floor of the beautiful new house very slowly, rested herself on a landing place, in order not to enter the apartment out of breath, and appeared before M. Colbert, who, with his own hands, held both the folding doors open. The duchesse paused at the threshold, for the purpose of well studying the character of the man with whom she was about to converse. At the first glance, the round, large, heavy head, thick brows, and ill-favored features of Colbert, who wore, thrust low down on his head, a cap like a priest's calotte, seemed to indicate that but little difficulty was likely to be met with in her negotiations with him, but also that she was to expect as little interest in the discussion of particulars, for there was scarcely any indication that the rough and uncouth nature of the man was susceptible to the impulses of refined revenge or of an exalted ambition. But when, on closer inspection, the duchesse perceived the small, piercingly black eyes, the longitudinal wrinkles of his high and massive forehead, the imperceptible twitching of the lips, on which were apparent traces of rough good humor, Madame de Chevreuse altered her opinion of him, and felt she could say to herself, "I have found the man I want." "What is the subject, madam, which procures me the honor of a visit from you?" he inquired. "The need I have of you, monsieur," returned the duchesse, "as well as that which you have of me." Madame de Chevreuse sat down in the armchair which M. Colbert advanced toward her. "Monsieur Colbert, you are the intendant of finances, and are ambitious of becoming the superintendent?" "Madam, nay, do not deny it. That would only unnecessarily prolong our conversation, and that is useless." M. Fouquet's fortune, madam, enables him to withstand all attempts. The superintendent in this age plays the part of the Colossus of Rhodes. The vessels pass beneath him and do not overthrow him. "Very good, Monsieur Colbert, since you persist in showing so much sensitiveness with me, as if you were ignorant that I am Madame de Chevreuse, and also that I am somewhat advanced in years. In other words, that you have to do with a woman who has had political dealings with the Cardinal Richelieu, and who has no time to lose. As, I repeat, you do not hesitate to commit such an imprudence, I shall go and find others who are more intelligent and more desirous of making their fortunes." You give me a very poor idea of negotiations of the present day. I assure you that if, in my earlier days, a woman had gone to M. de Cinq-Mars, who was not, moreover, a man of a very high order of intellect, and had said to him about the cardinal what I had just said to you of M. Fouquet, and de Cinq-Mars would by this time have already set actively to work. Nay, madam, show a little indulgence, I entreat you. Well then, do you really consent to replace M. Fouquet? Certainly I do, if the king dismisses M. Fouquet. Again, a word too much. It is quite evident that, if you have not yet succeeded in driving M. Fouquet from his post, it is because you have not been able to do so. Therefore, I should be the greatest simpleton possible if, in coming to you, I did not bring the very thing you require. I am distressed to be obliged to persist, madam, said Colbert, after a silence which enabled the Duchesse to sound the depths of his dissimulation. "But I must warn you that, for the last 6 years, denunciation after denunciation has been made against M. Fouquet, and he has remained unshaken and unaffected by them. There is a time for everything, Monsieur Colbert. Those who were the authors of those denunciations were not called Madame de Chevreuse, and they had no proofs equal to the 6 letters from M. de Mazarin which established the offense in question. The offense, the crime, if you like it better, the crime committed by M. Fouquet. Nothing less. It is rather strange, M. Colbert, but your face, which just now was cold and indifferent, is now positively the very reverse. A crime. I am delighted to see that it makes an impression upon you. It is because that word, madam, embraces so many things. It embraces the post of superintendent of finance for yourself, and a letter of exile or the Bastille for M. Fouquet. Forgive me, Madame la Duchesse, but it is almost impossible that M. Fouquet could be exiled. To be imprisoned or disgraced, that is already a great deal." "Oh, I am perfectly aware of what I am saying," returned Madame de Chevreuse coldly. "I do not live at such a distance from Paris as not to know what takes place there. The king does not like M. Fouquet, and he would willingly sacrifice M. Fouquet if an opportunity were only given him. It must be a good one, though. Good enough, and one I estimate to be worth 500,000 francs. "In what way?" said Colbert. "I mean, monsieur, that holding this opportunity in my own hands, I will not allow it to be transferred to yours except for a sum of 500,000 francs. I understand you perfectly, madam. But since you have fixed a price of the sale, let me now see the value of the articles to be sold." "Oh, a mere trifle. 6 letters, as I have already told you, from M. de Mazarin, and the autographs will most assuredly not be regarded as too highly priced, if they establish, in an irrefutable manner, that M. Fouquet has embezzled large sums of money from the treasury and appropriated them to his own purposes." "In an irrefutable manner, do you say?" observed Colbert, whose eyes sparkled with delight. "Perfectly so. Would you like to read the letters?" "With all my heart. Copies, of course." "Of course, the copies," said the Duchesse, as she drew from her bosom a small packet of papers flattened by her velvet bodice. "Read," she said. Colbert eagerly snatched the papers and devoured them. "Excellent," he said. "It is clear enough, is it not?" "Yes, madam, yes. M. Mazarin must have handed the money to M. Fouquet, who must have kept it for his own purposes. But the question is, what money?" "Exactly. What money? If we come to terms, I will join to these 6 letters a 7th, which will supply you with the fullest particulars." Colbert reflected. "And the originals of these letters?" "A useless question to ask. Exactly as if I were to ask you, Monsieur Colbert, whether the money bags you will give me will be full or empty." "Very good, madam." "Is it concluded?" "No, for there is one circumstance to which neither of us has given any attention." "Name it." "M. Fouquet could be utterly ruined, under the legal circumstances you have detailed, only by means of legal proceedings. Well, a public scandal, for instance, and yet neither the legal proceedings nor the scandal could be commenced against him. Why not? Because he is procured general of the Parliament. Because, too, in France, all public administrators, the army, justice itself, and commerce, are intimately connected by ties of good fellowship, which people call esprit de corps. In such a case, madam, the Parliament will never permit its chief to be dragged before a public tribunal, and never, even if he be dragged there by royal authority, never, I say, will he be condemned. Well, Monsieur Colbert, I do not see what I have to do with that. I am aware of that, madam, but I have to do with it, and it consequently diminishes the value of what you brought to show me. What good can a proof of a crime be to me, without the possibility of obtaining a condemnation?" Ah, Monsieur Colbert," said the Duchesse, "forgive me, but I did not think you were so impressionable. Very good. In that case, since you need more than I have to give you, there is no occasion to speak of the matter at all. Yes, madam, we will go on talking of it. Only, as the value of your commodities had decreased, you must lower your pretensions. You are bargaining, then?" 200,000 francs, said Colbert. The Duchesse laughed in his face, and then said, suddenly, wait a moment. I have another arrangement to propose. Will you give me 300,000 francs? Oh, you can either accept or refuse my terms. Besides, that is not all. Less so than you think. Perhaps, for it is not money I am going to ask you for. What is it, then? A service. You know that I have always been most affectionately attached to the Queen, and I am desirous of having an interview with Her Majesty. That is the very reason why I wish to have an interview with Her Majesty, for in Flanders there is a great variety of these kinds of complaints. What? Cancers, a fearful, incurable disorder. The Flemish women do not die the sooner on that account. When they are great sufferers from this disease, they go in search of remedies. And the Beguines of Bruges are excellent doctors for every kind of disease. They have precious waters of one sort or another, specifics of various kinds. And they give a bottle of it in a wax candle to the sufferer, whereby the priests are gainers, and heaven is served by the disposal of both their wares. I will take the Queen some of this holy water, which I will procure from the Beguines of Bruges. Her Majesty will recover, and will burn as many wax candles as she may see fit. You see, Monsieur Colbert, to prevent my seeing the Queen is almost as bad as committing the crime of regicide. You are undoubtedly, Madame la Duchesse, a woman of exceedingly great abilities, and I am more than astounded at their display. Still, I cannot but suppose that this charitable consideration toward the Queen in some measure covers a slight personal interest for yourself. I have not given myself the trouble to conceal it, that I am aware of Monsieur Colbert. You said, I believe, that I had a slight personal interest? On the contrary, it is a very great interest, and I will prove it to you by resuming what I was saying. If you procure me a personal interview with Her Majesty, I will be satisfied with the 300,000 francs I acclaimed. If not, I shall keep my letters, unless, indeed, you give me on the spot 500,000 francs. And rising from her seat with this decisive remark, the old Duchesse plunged M. Colbert into a disagreeable perplexity. To bargain any further was out of question, and not to bargain was to pay a great deal too dearly for them. Madam, he said, I shall have the pleasure of handing over 100,000 crowns, but how shall I get the actual letters themselves? In the simplest manner in the world. My dear Monsieur Colbert, whom will you trust? You surely will make an exception in your own favor, Monsieur Colbert? I mean that, if you would take the trouble to accompany me to the place where the letters are, they would be delivered into your own hands, and you will be able to verify and check them. Quite true. Colbert colored to the tips of his ears. Like all eminent men in the art of figures, he was of an insolent and mathematical probity. I will take with me, madam, he said, 2 orders of the amount agreed upon, payable at my treasury. Will that satisfy you? Would that the orders on your treasury were for 2 millions, Monsieur l'Intendant. I shall have the pleasure of showing you the way then. Allow me to order my carriage. I have a carriage below, monsieur. Colbert coughed like an irresolute man. He imagined for a moment that the proposition of the Duchesse was a snare, that perhaps someone was waiting at the door, and that she whose secret had just been sold to Colbert for 100,000 crowns had already offered it to Fouquet for the same sum. As he still hesitated, the Duchesse looked at him full in the face. You prefer your own carriage, she said. I admit I do. You suppose I'm going to lead you into a snare or trap of some sort or other? Madame la Duchesse, you have a character of being somewhat inconsiderate at times, as I am reputed a sober, solemn character. A jest or practical joke might compromise me. Yes, the fact is you are afraid. Well, then, take your own carriage, as many servants as you like. Only think well of what I am going to say, what we two may arrange between ourselves. We are the only persons who will know. If a third person is present, we might as well tell the whole world about it. After all, I do not make a point of it. My carriage shall follow yours, and I shall be satisfied to accompany you in your own carriage to the Queen. To the Queen? Have you forgotten that already? Is it possible that one of the clauses of the agreement of so much importance to me can have escaped you so soon? How trifling it seems to you. Indeed, If I had known it, I should have asked double what I have done. I have reflected, madam, and I shall not accompany you. Really, and why not? Because I have the most perfect confidence in you. You overpower me. But provided I receive the 100,000 crowns. Here they are, madam, said Colbert, scribbling a few lines on a piece of paper, which he handed to the Duchesse, adding, "You are paid. The trade is a fine one, Monsieur Colbert, and I will reward you for it," she said, beginning to laugh. Madame de Chevreuse' laugh was a very sinister sound. A man with youth, faith, love, life itself, throbbing in his heart, would prefer a sob to such a lamentable laugh. The Duchesse opened the front of her dress and drew forth from her bosom, somewhat less white than it once had been, a small packet of papers, tied with flame-colored ribbon, and, still laughing, she said, "There, Monsieur Colbert, are the originals of Cardinal Mazarin's letters. They are now your own property," she added, refastening the body of her dress. "Your fortune is secured. And now accompany me to the Queen." "No, madam. If you are again about to run the chance of Her Majesty's displeasure, and were known at the Palais Royal that I have been the means of introducing you there, the Queen would never forgive me while she lived. No. There are certain persons at the palace who are devoted to me, who will procure you an admission without my being compromised. Just as you please, provided I enter. What do you term those religious women at Bruges who cure disorders? Béguines. Good, are you one? As you please, but I must soon cease to be one. That is your affair. Excuse me, but I do not wish to be exposed to a refusal. That is again your own affair, madam. I am going to give directions to the head valet of the gentleman, in waiting on the Queen, to allow admission to a Béguine, who brings an effectual remedy for Her Majesty's sufferings. You are the bearer of my letter. You will undertake to be provided with a remedy, and will give every explanation on the subject. I admit a knowledge of Béguine, but I deny all knowledge of Madame de Chevreuse. Here, madam, then, is your letter of introduction. Chapter 42. The Skin of the Bear. Colbert handed the Duchesse the letter, and gently drew aside the chair behind which she was standing. Madame de Chevreuse, with a very slight bow, immediately left the room. Colbert, who had recognized Mazarin's handwriting and had counted the letters, rang to summon his secretary, whom he enjoined to go in immediate search of M. Vanel, a councillor of the Parliament. The secretary replied that, according to his usual practice, M. Vanel had just that moment entered the house, in order to give the intendant an account of the principal details of the business which had been transacted during the day in Parliament. Colbert approached one of the lamps, read the letters of the deceased cardinal over again, smiled repeatedly as he recognized the great value of the papers Madame de Chevreuse had just delivered, and burying his head in his hand for a few minutes, reflected profoundly. In the meantime, a tall, loosely made man entered the room, his spare, thin face, steady look, and hooked nose, as he entered Colbert's cabinet, with a modest assurance of manner, revealed a character at once supple and decided, supple towards a master who could throw him the prey, firm towards the dogs who might possibly be disposed to dispute his possession. M. Vanel carried a voluminous bundle of papers under his arm, and placed it on the desk on which Colbert was leaning both his elbows as he supported his head. "Good day, M. Vanel," said the latter, rousing himself from his meditation. "Good day, Monseigneur," said Vanel, naturally. "You should say Monsieur and not Monseigneur," replied Colbert gently. "Not yet." Colbert coughed, opened and read the letter, and then put it carefully away in his pocket, while Vanel turned over the leaves of the papers he had brought with him with an unmoved and unconcerned air. "Vanel," he said suddenly to his protégé, "you are a hard-working man, I know. Would 12 hours daily labor frighten you? I work 15 hours every day." "Impossible. A councillor need not work more than 3 hours a day in Parliament." "Oh, I am working up some returns for a friend of mine in the Department of Accounts, and, as I still have spare time on my hands, I am studying Hebrew." "Your reputation stands high in the Parliament, Vanel." "I believe so, Monseigneur. You must not grow rusty in your post of councillor. What must I do to avoid it?" "Purchase a high place. Mean and low ambitions are very difficult to satisfy. Small purses are the most difficult ones to fill, Monseigneur. What post have you in view? Said Colbert. I see none, not one. There is one, certainly, but one need be almost the king himself to be able to buy it without inconvenience, and the king will not be inclined, I suppose, to purchase the post of procureur general. At these words, Vanel fixed his peculiar, humble, dull look upon Colbert, who could hardly tell whether Vanel comprehended him or not. Why do you speak to me, Monseigneur, said Vanel, of the post of procureur general to Parliament? I know no other post than the one M. Fouquet fills. You are not over fastidious, Monseigneur, but before the post can be bought, it must be offered for sale. I believe, Monsieur Vanel, that it will be for sale before long. For sale? What? Fouquet's post of procureur general? So it is said. The post which renders him so perfectly invincible. For sale. Ha, ha, said Vanel, beginning to laugh. Afraid? No, but... Are you desirous of obtaining it? You are laughing at me, Monseigneur, replied Vanel. Is it likely that a councillor of the Parliament would not be desirous of becoming procureur general? Well, Monsieur Vanel, since I tell you that the post, as report goes, will be shortly for sale, I cannot help repeating, Monseigneur, that it is impossible. A man never throws away the buckler, behind which he maintains his honor, his fortune, his very life. There are certain men mad enough, Vanel, to fancy themselves out of reach of all mischances. Yes, Monseigneur, but such men never commit their mad acts for the advantage of the poor Vanels of the world. Why not? For the very reason that those Vanels are poor. It is true that Fouquet's post might cost a good round sum. What would you bid for it, Monsieur Vanel? Everything I am worth. 300,000 or 400,000 francs. And the post is worth 1.5 million at the very lowest. I know persons who have offered 1,700,000 francs without being able to persuade M. Fouquet to sell. Besides, supposing it were to happen that M. Fouquet wished to sell, which I do not believe, in spite of what I have been told. Ah, you have heard something about it, then. Who told you? M. de Gourville, M. Polisson, and others. Very good. If, therefore, M. Fouquet did wish to sell, I could not buy it just yet, since the superintendent will only sell for ready money, and no one has 1.5 million to put down at once. Colbert suddenly interrupted the councillor by an imperious gesture. He had begun to meditate, observing his superior's serious attitude and his perseverance in continuing the conversation on this subject. Vanel awaited the solution without venturing to precipitate it. Explain to me the privileges which this post confers. The right of impeaching every French subject who is not a prince of the blood. The right of quashing all proceedings taken against any Frenchman who is neither king nor prince. The procureur general is the king's right hand to punish the guilty. The office is the means whereby also he can evade the administration of justice. Fouquet, therefore, would be able, by stirring up Parliament, to maintain himself even against the king, and the king could as easily, by humoring M. Fouquet, get his edicts registered in spite of every opposition and objection. The procureur general could be made a very useful or a very dangerous instrument. Vanel, would you like to be procureur general? Said Colbert, suddenly, softening both his look and his voice. I, exclaimed the latter. I have already had the honor to represent to you that I want about 1,100,000 francs to make up the amount. Borrow that sum from your friends. I have no friends richer than myself. You are an honest and honorable man, Vanel. Ah, Monseigneur, if the world would only think as you do. I think so, and that is quite enough, and if it should be needed, I will be your security. Do not forget the proverb, Monseigneur. What is it? That he who becomes responsible for another has to pay for his fancy. Let that make no difference. Vanel rose, bewildered by this offer which had been so suddenly and unexpectedly made to him. You are not trifling with me, Monseigneur, he said. Stay, you say that M. Gourville has spoken to you about M. Fouquet's post? Yes, and M. Polisson also. Officially so, or only through their own suggestion? These were their very words. The Parliament members are as proud as they are wealthy. They ought to club together 2 or 3 millions among themselves. to present to their protector and leader, M. Fouquet. And what did you reply? I said that, for my own part, I would give 10,000 francs if necessary. No, but M. Fouquet is our chief. He is in debt, is on the high road to ruin, and we ought to save the honor of the body of which we are members. Exactly, and that explains why M. Fouquet will be always safe and sound, so long as he occupies his present post, replied Colbert. Thereupon, said Vanel, M. Gourville added, if we would do anything out of charity to M. Fouquet, it cannot be otherwise than most humiliating to him, and he will be sure to refuse it. Let the Parliament subscribe among themselves to purchase, in a proper manner, the post of Procureur General. In that case, all would go well, the honor of our body would be saved, and M. Fouquet's pride spared. That is an opening. I considered it so, Monseigneur. Well, Monsieur Vanel, you will go at once, and find out either M. Gourville or M. Polisson. Do you know any other friend of M. Fouquet? I know M. de La Fontaine very well. La Fontaine the rhymester? Yes. He used to write verses to my wife, when M. Fouquet was one of our friends. Go to him, then, and try and procure an interview with the superintendent. Willingly, but the sum itself. On the day and hour you arrange to settle the matter, Monsieur Vanel, you shall be supplied with the money, so do not make yourself uneasy on that account. Monseigneur, such munificence. You eclipse kings even. You surpass M. Fouquet himself. Stay a moment. Do not let us mistake each other. I do not make you a present of 1,400,000 francs, Monsieur Vanel, for I have children to provide for, but I will lend you that sum. The repayment in 8 years, and a mortgage upon the appointment itself. Wait a moment. I reserve to myself the right of purchasing the post from you at 150,000 francs profit for yourself, if, in your mode of filling the office, you do not follow out a line of conduct in conformity with the interests of the king and with my projects. H, said Vanel, in an altered tone. Is there anything in that which can possibly be objectionable to you, Monsieur Vanel? Said Colbert, coldly. Oh, no, replied Vanel, nervously. I will press him to sign. Be most careful to do nothing of the kind. Do not speak of signatures with M. Fouquet, nor of deeds, nor even ask him to pass his word. Understand this. Otherwise you will lose everything. All you have to do is to get M. Fouquet to give you his hand on the matter. Go. Chapter 43. An interview with the Queen Mother. The Queen Mother was in the bedroom at the Palais Royal with Madame de Motteville and Sonora Molina. King Louis, who had been impatiently expected the whole day, had not made his appearance, and the Queen, who was growing impatient, had often sent to inquire about him. The moral atmosphere of the court seemed to indicate an approaching storm. The courtiers and the ladies of the court avoided meeting in the antechambers and the corridors in order not to converse on compromising subjects. Monsieur had joined the king early in the morning for a hunting party. Madame remained in her own apartment, cool and distant to everyone, and the Queen Mother, after she had said her prayers in Latin, talked of domestic matters with her two friends in pure Castilian. Madame de Motteville, who understood the language perfectly, answered her in French. Yes, said Molina, children, for whom every mother becomes a sacrifice. Yes, replied the Queen, a mother sacrifices everything, certainly. She did not finish her phrase, for she fancied, when she raised her eyes toward the full-length portrait of the pale Louis XIII, that light once more flashed from her husband's dull eyes, and his nostrils grew livid with wrath. The portrait seemed animated by a living expression. Speak it did not, but it seemed to threaten. A profound silence succeeded the Queen's last remark. La Molina began to turn over ribbons and laces on a large work table. Madame de Motteville, surprised at a look of mutual intelligence which had been exchanged between the confidante and her mistress, cast down her eyes like a discreet woman, and pretending to be observant of nothing that was passing, listened with the utmost attention to every word. She heard nothing, however, but a very insignificant hum on the part of the Spanish duenna, who was the incarnation of caution, and a profound sigh on that of the Queen. She looked up immediately. You are suffering? She said. No, Motteville, No, why you say that? You are right. I did sigh in truth. Monsieur Vallière is not far off. I believe he is in Madame's apartment. Why is he with Madame? Occupation, Maudeville, occupation. If anyone is really ill, it is my poor daughter. Less so this evening, though. Do not believe that too confidently, madam, said de Maudeville. And, as if to justify her caution, a sharp, acute pain seized the queen, who turned deadly pale and threw herself back in a chair, with every symptom of a sudden fainting fit. Molina ran to a richly gilded tortoiseshell cabinet, from which he took a large rock crystal bottle of scented salts and held it to the queen's nostrils, who inhaled it wildly for a few minutes and murmured, "Your Majesty's death is not so near at hand," added Molina, replacing the smelling bottle in the cabinet. "Does your Majesty feel better now?" inquired Madame de Maudeville. "Much better," returned the queen, placing her finger on her lips to impose silence on her favorite. "What is strange?" said the queen. "Does your Majesty remember the day when this pain attacked you for the first time?" "I remember only that it was a grievously sad day for me, Maudeville. But your Majesty did not always regard that day as a sad one." "Why?" "Because 23 years ago, on that very day, his present Majesty, your own glorious son, was born at the very same hour." The queen uttered a loud cry, buried her face in her hands, and seemed utterly prostrate for some minutes. But whether from recollections which arose in her mind, or from reflection, or even with sheer pain, was doubtful. La Molina darted a look at Madame de Maudeville, so full of bitter reproach, that the poor woman, perfectly ignorant of its meaning, was in her own exculpation on the point of asking an explanation, when suddenly Anne of Austria rose and said, "Yes, the 5th of September. My sorrow began on the 5th of September. The greatest joy one day, the deepest sorrow the next. The sorrow," she added, "the bitter expiation of a too excessive joy." And from that moment, Anne of Austria, whose memory and reason seemed to be suspended for time, remained impenetrable, with vacant look, mind almost wandering, and hands hanging heavily down, as if life had almost departed. "We must put her to bed," said La Molina. "Presently, Molina." "Let us leave the queen alone," added the Spanish attendant. Madame de Maudeville rose. Large tears were rolling down the queen's pallid face, and Molina, having observed this sign of weakness, fixed her black, vigilant eyes upon her. "Yes, yes," replied the queen. "Leave us, Maudeville. Go." The word "us" produced a disagreeable effect upon the ears of the French favorite, for it signified that an interchange of secrets or of revelations of the past was about to be made, and that one person was to throw in the conversation which seemed likely to take place. "Will Molina alone be sufficient for your Majesty tonight?" inquired the French woman. "Yes," replied the queen. Madame de Maudeville bowed in submission and was about to withdraw, when suddenly an old female attendant, dressed as if she belonged to the Spanish court of the year 1620, opened the door and surprised the queen in her tears. "The remedy!" she cried, delightedly, to the queen, as she unceremoniously approached the group. "What remedy?" said Anne of Austria. "For your Majesty's sufferings," the former replied. "Who brings it?" asked Madame de Maudeville, eagerly. "Monsieur Vallière?" "No, a lady from Flanders." "From Flanders? Is she Spanish?" inquired the queen. "I don't know." "Who sent her?" "M. Colbert." "Her name?" "She did not mention it." "Her position in life?" "She will answer that herself." "Who is she?" "She is masked." "Go, Molina, go and see," cried the queen. "It is needless," suddenly replied a voice, at once firm and gentle in its tone, which proceeded from the other side of the tapestry hangings, a voice which made the attendant start, and the queen tremble excessively. At the same moment, a masked female appeared through the hangings, and, before the queen could speak a syllable, she added, "I am connected with the Order of the Beguines of Bruges, and do, indeed, bring with me the remedy which is certain to effect a cure of your Majesty's complaint." No one uttered a sound, and the Beguine did not move a step. "Speak," said the queen. "I will, when we are alone," was the answer, and of Austria looked at her attendants, who immediately withdrew. The Beguine, thereupon, advanced a few steps toward the queen, and bowed reverently before her. The queen gazed with increasing mistrust at this woman, who, in her turn, fixed a pair of brilliant eyes upon her through her mask. "The Queen of France must indeed be very ill," said Anne of Austria, "if it is known at the beguinage of Bruges that she stands in need of being cured. Your Majesty is not irremediably ill. But tell me how you happen to know I am suffering? Your Majesty has friends in Flanders. Since these friends, then, sent you, mention their names." "Impossible, madam, since your Majesty's memory has not been awakened by your heart." Anne of Austria looked up, endeavoring to discover through the mysterious mask and this ambiguous language the name of her companion, who expressed herself with such familiarity and freedom. Then, suddenly, wearied by a curiosity which wounded every feeling of pride in her nature, she said, "You are ignorant, perhaps, that royal personages are never spoken to with a face masked." "Deign to excuse me, madam," replied the Beguine, humbly. "I have made a vow, madam, to attend and aid all afflicted and suffering persons, without ever permitting them to behold my face. I might have been able to administer some relief to your body and to your mind, too, but since your Majesty forbids me, I will take my leave. Adieu, madam, adieu." "Let us first speak a little of the mind, if you please," said the Beguine, "of the mind which, I am sure, must also suffer. My mind? There are cancers so insidious in their nature that their very pulsations cannot be felt. Such cancers, madam, leave the ivory whiteness of the skin unblemished, and putrefy not the firm, fair flesh with their blue tints. The physician who bends over the patient's chest hears not, though he listens, the insatiable teeth of the disease grinding onward to the muscles, and the blood flows freely on. The knife has never been able to destroy, and rarely, even temporarily, to disarm the rage of these mortal scourges. Their home is in the mind, which they corrupt. They gnaw the whole heart until it breaks. Such, madam, are the cancers fatal to queens. Are you, too, free from their scourge?" And slowly raised her arm, dazzling in its perfect whiteness, and pure in its rounded outlines as it was in the time of her earlier days. "The evils to which you allude," she said, "are the condition of the lives of the high in rank upon earth, to whom heaven has imparted mind. When those evils become too heavy to be borne, heaven lightens their burdens by penitence and confession. Thus only we lay down our burden and the secrets that oppress us. But forget not that the same gracious heaven, in its mercy, apportions to their trials the strength of the feeble creatures of its hand. And my strength has enabled me to bear my burden. For the secrets of others, the silence of heaven is more than sufficient. For my own secrets, that of my confessor is enough. Queens have no friends. If you have nothing further to say to me, if you feel yourself inspired by heaven as a prophetess, leave me, I pray, for I dread the future." "I should have supposed," said the Beguine resolutely, "that you would rather have dreaded the past." Hardly had these words escaped her lips than the queen rose up proudly. "Speak," she cried, in a short, imperious tone of voice. "Explain yourself briefly, quickly, entirely, or if not, prove that to me comfort instead of irritating me. Serious misfortunes, indeed. Have I not lost a king? I speak not of misfortunes of that kind. I wish to ask you if, since the birth of the king, any indiscretion on a friend's part has caused your Majesty the slightest serious anxiety or distress." "I do not understand you," replied the queen, clenching her teeth in order to conceal her emotion. "I will make myself understood. Then, your Majesty remembers that the king was born on the 5th of September, 1638, at 11:15 o'clock. At 12:30, continued the Beguine, the Dauphin, who had been baptized by Monseigneur de Meaux and the king's in your own presence, was acknowledged as the heir of the crown of France. The king then went to the chapel of the old Chateau de Saint-Germain to hear the Te Deum chanted." Quite true," murmured the queen. "Your Majesty's conferment took place in the presence of Monsieur, His Majesty's late uncle, of the princes, and of the ladies attached to the court. The king's physician, Bouvard, and Honoré, the surgeon, were stationed in the antechamber. Your Majesty slept from 3 o'clock until 7, I believe. Yes, yes, but you tell me no more than everyone else knows, as well as you and myself. I am now, madam, approaching that which very few persons are acquainted with. Very few persons. Did I say alas? I might say 2 only, for formerly there were but 5 in all, and, for many years past, the secret has been well preserved by the deaths of the principal participators in it. The late king sleeps now with his ancestors. Perronnette, the midwife, soon followed him. Laporte is already forgotten. The queen opened her lips as though to reply. She felt beneath her icy hand, with which she kept her face half concealed, the beads of perspiration on her brow. It was 8 o'clock, pursued the Beguine. The king was seated at supper, full of joy and happiness. Around him on all sides arose wild cries of delight and drinking a health. The people cheered beneath the balconies. The Swiss guards, the Musketeers, and the royal guards wandered through the city, borne about in triumph by the drunken students. Those boisterous sounds of general joy disturbed the Dauphin, the future King of France, who was quietly lying in the arms of Madame de Hausac, his nurse, and whose eyes, as he opened them and stared about, might have observed 2 crowns at the foot of his cradle. Suddenly your Majesty uttered a piercing cry, and Dame Perronnette immediately flew to your bedside. The doctors were dining in a room at some distance from your chamber. The palace, deserted from the frequency of the eruptions made into it, was without either sentinels or guards. The midwife, having questioned and examined your Majesty, gave a sudden exclamation as if in wild astonishment, and taking you in her arms, bewildered almost out of her senses from sheer distress of mind, dispatched Laporte to inform the king that her Majesty the Queen Mother wished to see him in her room. Laporte, you are aware, madam, was a man of the most admirable calmness and presence of mind. He did not approach the king as if he were the bearer of alarming intelligence and wished to inspire the terror he himself experienced. Besides, it was not a very terrifying intelligence which awaited the king. Therefore, Laporte appeared with a smile upon his lips and approached the king's chair, saying to him, Sire, the queen is very happy, and would be still more so to see your Majesty. On that day, Louis XIII would have given his crown away to the veriest beggar for a God bless you. Animated, light-hearted, and full of gaiety, the king rose from the table and said to those around him, in a tone that Henry IV might have adopted, Gentlemen, I am going to see my wife. He came to your beside, madam. At the very moment Dame Perronnette presented to him a second prince, as beautiful and healthy as the former, and said, Sire, heaven will not allow the kingdom of France to fall into the female line. The king, yielding to a first impulse, clasped the child in his arms and cried, O heaven, I thank thee. He did not approach the king as if he were the bearer of alarming intelligence and wished to inspire the terror he himself experienced. Besides, it was not a very terrifying intelligence which awaited the king. At this part of her recital, the Beguine paused, observing how intensely the queen was suffering. She had thrown herself back in her chair, and with her head bent forward and her eyes fixed, listened without seeming to hear, and her lips moving convulsively, either breathing a prayer to heaven or imprecations on the woman standing before her. I do not believe that because there could be but one Dauphin in France, exclaimed the Beguine, the queen allowed that child to vegetate, banished from his royal parents' presence. She was on that account an unfeeling mother. Oh, no, no. There are those alive who have known and witnessed the passionate kisses she imprinted on that innocent creature in exchange for a life of misery and gloom to which state policy condemned the twin brother of Louis XIV. Oh, heaven, murmured the queen feebly. It is admitted, continued the Beguine quickly, that when the king perceived the effect which would result from the existence of 2 sons, equal in age and pretensions, he trembled for the welfare of France, for the tranquility of the state. And it is equally well known that Cardinal de Richelieu, by the direction of Louis XIII, thought over the subject with deep attention, and after an hour's meditation in His Majesty's cabinet, he pronounced the following sentence. 1 prince means peace and safety for the state. 2 competitors, civil war and anarchy. The queen rose suddenly from her seat, pale as death, and her hands clenched together. You know too much, she said in a hoarse, thick voice, since you refer to secrets of state. As for the friends from whom you have acquired this secret, they are false and treacherous. You are their accomplice in the crime, which is being now committed. Now, throw aside your mask, or I will have you arrested by my captain of the guards. Do not think that this secret terrifies me. You have obtained it. You shall restore it to me. Never shall it leave your bosom, for neither your secret nor your own life belong to you from this moment. And of Austria, joining gesture to threat, advanced a couple of steps toward the Beguine. Learn, said the latter, to know and value the fidelity, the honor, and secrecy of the friends you have abandoned. And then suddenly she threw aside her mask. Madame de Chevreuse, exclaimed the queen, with your majesty, the sole living confidant of the secret. Ah, murmured Anne of Austria, come and embrace me, Duchesse. Alas, you kill your friend in thus trifling with her terrible distress. And the queen, leaning her head upon the shoulder of the old Duchesse, burst into a flood of bitter tears. How young you are! Still, said the latter in a hollow voice, you can weep. Chapter 44. Two Friends. The queen looked steadily at Madame de Chevreuse and said, I believe you just now made use of the word happy in speaking of me. Hitherto, Duchesse, I had thought it impossible that a human creature could anywhere be found more miserable than the Queen of France. Your afflictions, madam, have indeed been terrible enough. But by the side of those great and grand misfortunes to which we, two old friends, separated by men's malice, were just now alluding, you possess sources of pleasure, slight enough in themselves it may be, but greatly envied by the world. What are they? Said Anne of Austria, bitterly. What can induce you to pronounce the word pleasure, Duchesse, you who, just now, admitted that my body and my mind both stood in need of remedies? Madame de Chevreuse collected herself for a moment, and then murmured, How far removed kings are from other people. What do you mean? I mean that they are so far removed from the vulgar herd that they forget that others often stand in need of the bare necessities of life. They are like the inhabitant of the African mountains, who, gazing from a verdant tableland, refreshed by the rills of melted snow, cannot comprehend that the dwellers in the plains below are perishing from hunger and thirst in the midst of the desert, burned up by the heat of the sun. The queen colored, for she now began to perceive the drift of her friend's remark. It was very wrong, she said, to have neglected you. Oh, madam, I know the king has inherited the hatred his father bore me. The king would exile me if he knew I were in the Palais Royal. I cannot say that the king is very well disposed towards you, Duchesse, replied the queen. But I could, secretly, you know. The Duchesse's disdainful smile produced a feeling of uneasiness in the queen's mind. Duchesse, she hastened to add, you did perfectly right to come here, even were it only to give us the happiness of contradicting the report of your death. Has it been rumored, then, that I was dead? Everywhere. And yet my children did not go into mourning. Ah, you know, Duchesse, the court is very frequently moving about from place to place. We see M. Albertines but seldom, and many things escape our minds in the midst of the preoccupations that constantly beset us. Your Majesty ought not to have believed the report of my death. Why not? Alas, we are all mortal, and you may perceive how rapidly I, your younger sister, as we used formerly to say, am approaching the tomb. If your Majesty believed me dead, you ought, in that case, to have been astonished not to have received the news. Death not unfrequently takes us by surprise, Duchesse. Oh, your Majesty, those who are burdened with secrets such as we have just now discussed must, as a necessity of their nature, satisfy their craving desire to divulge them, and they feel they must gratify that desire before they die. Among the various preparations for their final journey, the task of placing their papers in order is not omitted. The queen started. Your Majesty will be sure to learn, in a particular manner, the day of my death. In what way? Because your Majesty will receive the next day, under several coverings, everything connected with our mysterious correspondence of former times. Did you not burn them? Cried Anne in alarm. Traitors only, replied the Duchesse, destroy a royal correspondence. Traitors, do you say? Yes, certainly, or rather they pretend to destroy, instead of which they keep or sell it. Faithful friends, on the contrary, most carefully secrete such treasures, for it may happen that some day or other they will wish to seek out their queen in order to say to her, Madam, I am getting old. My health is fast failing me. In the presence of the danger of death, for there is a risk for your majesty that this secret may be revealed, take, therefore, this paper, so fraught with menace for yourself, and trust not to another to burn it for you. What paper do you refer to? As far as I am concerned, I have but one, it is true, but that is indeed most dangerous in its nature. Oh, Duchesse, tell me what it is. A letter dated Tuesday, the 2d of August, 1644, in which you beg me go to Noisy to see that unhappy child. In your own handwriting, madam, there are those words, that unhappy child. A profound silence ensued. The queen's mind was busy in the past. Madame de Chevreuse was watching the progress of her scheme. Yes, unhappy, most unhappy, murmured of Austria. How sad the existence he led, poor child, to finish it in so cruel a manner. Is he dead? Cried the Duchesse suddenly, with a curiosity whose genuine accents the queen instinctively detected. He died of consumption, died forgotten, died withered and blighted like the flowers a lover has given to his mistress, which she leaves to die secreted in a drawer where she had hid them from the gaze of others. Died, repeated the Duchesse with an air of discouragement, which would have afforded the queen the most unfeigned delight, had it not been tempered in some measure with a mixture of doubt. Died at Noisy? Yes, in the arms of his tutor, a poor, honest man, who did not long survive him. That can easily be understood. It is so difficult to bear up under the weight of such a loss and such a secret, said Madame de Chevreuse, the irony of which reflection the queen pretended not to perceive. Madame de Chevreuse continued, Well, madam, I inquired some years ago at Noisy about this unhappy child. I was told that it was not believed he was dead, and that was my reason for not having at first condoled with your majesty. For most certainly, if I could have thought it were true, never should I have made the slightest allusion to so deplorable an event, and thus have reawakened your majesty's most natural distress. You say that it is not believed the child died at Noisy? No, madam. What did they say about him then? They said, but no doubt they were mistaken. Nay, speak. They said that one evening, about the year 1645, a lady, beautiful and majestic in her bearing, which was observed notwithstanding the mask and the mantle that concealed her figure, a lady of rank, of very high rank, no doubt, came in a carriage to the place where the road branches off, the very same spot, you know, where I awaited news of the young prince when your majesty was graciously pleased to send me there. Well, that the boy's tutor or guardian took the child of this lady. Well, what next? That both the child and his tutor left that part of the country the very next day. There, you see there is some truth in what you relate, since, in point of fact, the poor child died from a sudden attack of illness, which makes the lives of all children, as doctors say, suspended as it were by a thread. What your majesty says is quite true. No one knows it better than yourself. No one believes it more strongly than myself. But yet, how strange it is. What can it now be, thought the queen, the person who gave me these details, who was sent to inquire after the child's health? Did you confide such a charge to anyone else? Oh, Duchesse, someone as dumb as your majesty, as dumb as myself. We will suppose it was myself, madam. There's someone, some months after, passing through Touraine, recognized both the tutor and the child. 2. I am wrong. Thought he recognized them, both living, cheerful, happy, and flourishing, the one in a green old age, the other in the flower of his youth. Judge after that what truth can be attributed to the rumors which are circulated, or what faith, after that, place in anything that may happen in the world. But I am fatiguing your majesty. It was not my intention, however, to do so, and I will take my leave of you, after renewing to you the assurance of my most respectful devotion. Stay, Duchesse, let's first talk a little about yourself. Of myself, madam, I am not worthy that you should bend your looks upon me. Why not, indeed? Are you not the oldest friend I have? Are you angry with me, Duchesse? I, indeed. What motive could I have? If I had reason to be angry with your majesty, should I have come here? Duchesse, age is fast creeping on us both. We should be united against that death whose approach cannot be far off. You overpower me, madam, with the kindness of your language. No one has ever loved or served me as you have done, Duchesse. Your Majesty is too kind in remembering it. Not so. Give me a proof of your friendship, Duchesse. My whole being is devoted to you, madam. The proof I require is that you should ask something of me. Ask. Oh, I know you well. No one is more disinterested, more noble, and truly loyal. Do not praise me too highly, madam, said the Duchesse, somewhat anxiously. I could never praise you as much as you deserve to be praised. And yet age and misfortune effect a terrible change in people, madam. So much the better. For the beautiful, the haughty, the adored Duchesse of former days might have answered me ungratefully. I do not wish for anything from you. Heaven be praised. The misfortunes you speak of have indeed worked a change in you, for you will now perhaps answer me, I accept. The Duchesse's look and smile soon changed at this conclusion, and she no longer attempted to act a false part. Speak, dearest, what do you want? I must first explain to you. Do so unhesitatingly. Well then, your Majesty can confer the greatest, the most ineffable pleasure upon me. What is it? Said the Queen, a little distant in her manner, from an uneasiness of feeling produced by this remark. But do not forget, my good Chevreuse, that I am quite as much under my son's influence as I was formerly under my husband's. I will not be too hard, madam. Call me as you used to do. It will be a sweet echo of our happy youth. Well, then, my dear mistress, my darling, and do you know Spanish still? Yes. Ask me in Spanish, then. Will your Majesty do me the honor to pass a few days with me at Dampierre? Is that all? Said the Queen, stupefied. Nothing more than that? Good heavens! Can you possibly imagine that, in asking you that, I am not asking you the greatest conceivable favor? If that really be the case, you do not know me. Will you accept? Yes, gladly. And I shall be happy, continued the Queen with some suspicion, if my presence can in any way be useful to you. Useful? Exclaimed the Duchesse, laughing. Oh, no, agreeable, delightful, if you like. And you promise me, then? I swear it, said the Queen, whereupon the Duchesse seized her beautiful hand and covered it with kisses. The Queen could not help murmuring to herself, She is a good-hearted woman and very generous, too. Will your Majesty consent to wait a fortnight before you come? Certainly, but why? Because, said the Duchesse, knowing me to be in disgrace, no one would lend me the 100,000 francs, which I require to put Dampierre into a state of repair. But when it is known that I require that sum for the purpose of receiving your Majesty at Dampierre properly, all the money in Paris will be at my disposal. Ah, said the Queen, gently nodding her head in sign of intelligence. 100,000 francs. You want 100,000 francs to put Dampierre into repair. Quite as much as that. And no one will lend you them? No one. I will lend them to you, if you like, Duchesse. Oh, I hardly dare accept such a sum. You would be wrong if you did not. Besides, 100,000 francs is really not much. I know but too well that you never set a right value upon your silence and secrecy. Push that table a little towards me, Duchesse, and I will write you an order on M. Colbert. No, on M. Fouquet, who is a far more courteous and obliging man. Will he pay it, though? If he will not pay it, I will, but it will be the first time he will have refused me. Chapter 45. How Jean de La Fontaine came to write his first tale. All these intrigues are exhausted. The human mind, so variously complicated, has been enabled to develop itself at its ease in the three outlines with which our recital has supplied it. It is not unlikely that, in the future we are now preparing, a question of politics and intrigues may still arise, but the springs by which they work will be so carefully concealed that no one will be able to see aught but flowers and paintings, just as at a theater, where a colossus appears upon the scene, walking along moved by the small legs and slender arms of a child concealed within the framework. We now return to St. Mandé, where the superintendent was in the habit of receiving a select confederacy of Epicureans. For some time past the host had met with nothing but trouble. Everyone in the house was aware of and felt for the minister's distress. No more magnificent or recklessly improvident reunions. Money had been the pretext assigned by Fouquet, and never was any pretext, as Gourville said, more fallacious, for there was not even a shadow of money to be seen. Vattel was resolutely painstaking in keeping up the reputation of the house, and yet the gardeners who supplied the kitchen complained of ruinous delays. The agents who supply of Spanish wine sent drafts which no one honored. Fishermen, whom the superintendent engaged on the coast of Normandy, calculated that if they were paid all that was due to them, the amount would enable them to retire comfortably for life. Fish, which at a later period was the cause of Vattel's death, did not arrive at all. However, on the ordinary reception days, Fouquet's friends flocked and more numerously than ever. Gourville and the Abbé Fouquet talked over money matters. That is to say, the Abbé borrowed a few pistoles from Gourville. Polisson, seated with his legs crossed, was engaged in finishing the peroration of a speech with which Fouquet was to open the Parliament, and this speech was a masterpiece, because Polisson wrote it for his friend. That is to say, he inserted all kinds of clever things the latter would most certainly never have taken the trouble to say of his own accord. Presently Lort and La Fontaine would enter from the garden, engaged in a dispute about the art of making verses. The painters and musicians, in their turn, were hovering near the dining room. As soon as 8 o'clock struck, the supper would be announced, for the superintendent never kept anyone waiting. It was already 7:30, and the appetites of the guests were beginning to declare themselves in an emphatic manner. As soon as all the guests were assembled, Gourville went straight up to Polisson, awoke him out of his reverie, and led him into the middle of a room and closed the doors. "Well," he said, "anything new?" Polisson raised his intelligent and gentle face and said, "I have borrowed 25,000 francs of my aunt, and I have them here in good sterling money." "Good," replied Gourville. "We only want 195,000 livres for the first payment." "The payment of what?" asked La Fontaine. "What?" "Absent-minded as usual. Why, it was you who told us the small estate at Corbly was going to be sold by one of M. Fouquet's creditors, and you also who proposed that all his friends should subscribe. More than that, it was you who said that you would sell a corner of your house at Châteauguay in order to furnish your own proportion, and you come and ask, the payment of what?" This remark was received with a general laugh, which made La Fontaine blush. "I beg your pardon," he said. "I had not forgotten it." "Oh, no. Only that is the truth, and the fact is, he is quite right. There is a great difference between forgetting and not remembering." "Sold?" "No." "Have you not sold the field, then?" inquired Gourville, in astonishment, for he knew the poet's disinterestedness. "My wife would not let me," replied the latter, at which there were fresh bursts of laughter. "And yet you went to Châteauguay for that purpose," said someone. "Certainly I did, and on horseback." "Poor fellow. I had 8 different horses, and I was almost bumped to death." "You are an excellent fellow. And you rested yourself when you arrived there?" "Rested? Oh, of course I did, for I had an immense deal of work to do. My wife had been flirting with a man to whom I wished to sell the land. The fellow drew back from his bargain, and so I challenged him. Very good, and you fought? It seems not. You know nothing about it, I suppose?" "No. My wife and her relations interfered in the matter. I was kept a quarter of an hour with my sword in my hand, but I was not wounded." "And your adversary?" "Oh, he wasn't wounded either, for he never came on the field." "Capital!" cried his friend from all sides. "You must have been terribly angry." "Exceedingly so. I caught cold. I returned home, and then my wife began to quarrel with me." "In real earnest?" "Yes, in real earnest. She threw a loaf of bread at my head, a large loaf." "And what did you do?" "Oh, I upset the table over her and her guests, and then I got on my horse again, and here I am." Everyone had great difficulty in keeping his countenance at the exposure of this heroic comedy, and when the laughter had subsided, one of the guests present said to La Fontaine, "Is that all you have brought back?" "Oh, no. I have an excellent idea in my head." "What is it?" "Have you noticed that there's a good deal of sportive, jesting poetry written in France?" "Yes, of course," replied everyone. And, pursued La Fontaine, only a very small portion of it is printed. The laws are strict, you know. That may be, but a rare article is a dear article, and that is the reason why I've written a small poem, excessively free in its style, very broad, and extremely cynical in its tone. The deuce you have. Yes, continued the poet with assumed indifference, and I have introduced the greatest freedom of language I could possibly employ. Peals of laughter again broke forth, while the poet was thus announcing the quality of his wares. And, he continued, I have tried to excel everything that Boccaccio, Artin, and other masters of the craft have written in the same style. Its fate is clear, said Polisson. It will be suppressed and forbidden. Do you think so? Said La Fontaine, simply. I assure you I did not do on my own account so much as M. Fouquet's. This wonderful conclusion again raised the mirth of all present. And I have sold the first edition of this little book for 800 livres, exclaimed La Fontaine, rubbing his hands together. Serious and religion's books sell at about half that rate. It would have been better, said Gourville, to have written 2 religious books instead. It would have been too long and not amusing enough, replied La Fontaine tranquilly. My 800 livres are in this little bag, and I beg to offer them as my contribution. As he said this, he placed his offering in the hands of their treasurer. It was then Lauret's turn, who gave 150 livres. The others stripped themselves in the same way, and the total sum in the purse amounted to 40,000 livres. The money was still being counted over when the superintendent noiselessly entered the room. He had heard everything, and then this man, who had possessed so many millions, who had exhausted all the pleasures and honors the world had to bestow, this generous heart, this inexhaustible brain, which had, like 2 burning crucibles, devoured the material and moral substance of the first kingdom in Europe, was seen to cross the threshold with tears in his eyes, and pass his fingers through the gold and silver which the bag contained. Poor offering, he said, in a soft and affected tone of voice, you will disappear into the smallest corner of my empty purse, but you'll fill to overflowing that which no one can ever exhaust, my heart. Thank you, my friends, thank you. And as he could not embrace every one present, who were all tearful, too, philosophers as they were, he embraced La Fontaine, saying to him, Poor fellow, so you have, on my account, been beaten by your wife and censured by your confessor. Oh, it is a mere nothing, replied the poet. If your creditors will only wait a couple of years, I shall have written 100 other tales, which, at 2 editions each, will pay off the debt. Chapter 46. La Fontaine in the character of a negotiator. Fouquet pressed La Fontaine's hand most warmly, saying to him, My dear poet, write 100 other tales, not only for the 80 pistoles which each of them will produce you, but, still more, to enrich our language with 100 new masterpieces of composition. Oh, said La Fontaine with a little air of pride, you must not suppose that I have only brought this idea and the 80 pistoles to the superintendent. Oh, indeed, was a general acclamation from all parts of the room. M. de La Fontaine is in funds today. Exactly, replied La Fontaine. Quick, quick, cried the assembly. Take care, said Polisson in La Fontaine's ear. You have had most brilliant success up to the present moment. Do not go beyond your depth. Not at all, Monsieur Polisson, and you, who are a man of decided taste, will be the first to approve of what I have done. We are talking of millions, remember, said Gourville. I have 1,500,000 francs here, Monsieur Gourville, he replied, striking himself on the chest. The deuce take this Gascon from Châteauthierry, cried Lauret. It is not the pocket you must tap, but the brain, said Fouquet. Stay a moment, Monsieur le Superintendent, added La Fontaine. You are not procured general. You are a poet. True, true, cried Laura Conrart, and every person present connected with literature. You are, I repeat, a poet and a painter, a sculptor, a friend of the arts and sciences. But acknowledge that you are no lawyer. If you were to be nominated at the Academy, you would refuse, I think. I think I should, with all due deference to the academicians. Very good. If, therefore, you do not wish to belong to the Academy, why do you allow yourself to form one of the Parliament? Oh, said Polisson, we are talking politics. I wish to know whether the barrister's gown does or does not become M. Fouquet. There is no question of the gown at all, retorted Polisson, annoyed at the laughter of those who were present. On the contrary, it is the gown, said Lorret. Take the gown away from the procureur general, said Conrart, and we have M. Fouquet left us still, of whom we have no reason to complain. But as he is no procureur general without his gown, we agree with him to La Fontaine, and pronounce the gown to be nothing but a bugbear. Fugiant risus leporesque, said Lorret. The smiles and the graces, said someone present. That is not the way, said Polisson gravely, that I translate Lepores. How do you translate it? Said La Fontaine. But why hares? Objected Conrart, vexed. Because the hare will be the very one who will not be overpleased to see M. Fouquet surrounded by all the attributes which his parliamentary strength and power confer on him. Quo non ascendum, said Conrart, seems impossible to me when one is fortunate enough to wear the gown of the procureur general. 9. I think the gown in question is a very good thing, replied the latter, but I equally think that 1.5 million is far better than the gown. And I am of Gourville's opinion, exclaimed Fouquet, stopping the discussion by the expression of his own opinion, which would necessarily bear down all the others. Tell it to me, said La Fontaine. I ought to know it too. Tell it, said the others. There was a tortoise which was, as usual, well protected by its shell, said Polisson. Whenever its enemies threatened it, it took refuge within its covering. One day someone said to it, You must feel very hot in such a house as that in the summer, and you are altogether prevented showing off your graces. There's a snake here who will give you 1.5 million for your shell. Good, said the superintendent, laughing. Well, what next? Said La Fontaine, more interested in the apologue than in the moral. The tortoise sold his shell and remained naked and defenseless. A vulture happened to see him, and being hungry, broke the tortoise's back with a blow of his beak and devoured it. The moral is that M. Fouquet should take very good care to keep his gown. La Fontaine understood the moral seriously. You forget Aeschylus, he said to his adversary. What do you mean? Aeschylus was bald-headed, and a vulture, your vulture probably, who was a great amateur in tortoises, mistook at a distance his head for a block of stone, and let a tortoise, which was shrunk up in his shell, fall upon it. Yes, La Fontaine is right, resumed Fouquet, who had become very thoughtful. Whenever a vulture wishes to devour a tortoise, he well knows how to break his shell, but happy is that tortoise a snake pays 1.5 million for his envelope. If anyone were to bring me a generous-hearted snake, like the one in your fable, Polisson, I would give him my shell. Rara avis in terris, cried Conrart. 10. And like a black swan, is he not? Added La Fontaine. Well then, the bird in question, black and rare, is already found. Do you mean to say that you have found a purchaser for my post of procureur general? Exclaimed Fouquet. I have, monsieur. But the superintendent never said that he wished to sell, resumed Polisson. I beg your pardon, said Conrart. You yourself spoke about it, even... Yes, I am a witness of that, said Gourville. He seems very tenacious about his brilliant idea, said Fouquet, laughing. Well, La Fontaine, who is the purchaser? A perfect blackbird, for he is a councillor belonging to the Parliament, an excellent fellow. What is his name? Vanel. Vanel, exclaimed Fouquet. Vanel, the husband of... Precisely, her husband. Yes, monsieur. Poor fellow, said Fouquet, with an expression of great interest. He wishes to be everything that you have been, monsieur, said Gourville, and to do everything that you have done. It is very agreeable. Tell us all about it, La Fontaine. It is very simple. I see him occasionally, and a short time ago I met him, walking about on the Place de la Bastille at the very moment when I was about to take the small carriage to come down here to Saint-Mandé. He must have been watching his wife, interrupted Lorret. Oh, no, said La Fontaine. He is far from being jealous. He accosted me, embraced me, and took me to the inn called L'Image Saint-Fiacre, and told me all about his troubles. He has his troubles, then? Yes. His wife wants to make him ambitious. Well, and he told you that someone had spoken to him about a post in Parliament, that M. Fouquet's name had been mentioned, that ever since Madame Vanel dreams of nothing else than being called Madame la Procure Generale, and that it makes her ill and kills her every night. She does not dream about it. The deuce! Poor woman, said Fouquet. Wait a moment. Conrart is always telling me that I do not know how to conduct matters of business. You will see how I manage this one. Well, go on. I suppose you know, sighed Vanel, that the value of a post such as that which Fouquet holds is by no means trifling. How much do you imagine it to be? He said. Fouquet, I know, has refused 1,700,000 francs. My wife, replied Vanel, had estimated it at about 1,400,000. Ready money? I said, yes. She has sold some property of hers in Guyenne and has received the purchase money. That's a pretty sum to touch all at once, said the Abbé Fouquet, who had not hitherto said a word. Poor Madame Vanel, murmured Fouquet. Polisson shrugged his shoulders as he whispered in Fouquet's ear, that woman is a perfect fiend. That may be, and it will be delightful to make use of this fiend's money to repair the injury which an angel has done herself for me. Well, inquired La Fontaine, what about my negotiation? Admirable, my dear poet. I do not believe it, said La Fontaine. Why? You have not yet heard the denouement of my story. If there is a denouement, why do you beat about the bush so much? Semper ad eventum. Is that correct? Said Fouquet, with the air of a nobleman who condescends to barbarisms, to which the Latinists present answered with loud applause. 11. My denouement, cried La Fontaine, is that Vanel, that determined blackbird, knowing that I was coming to Saint-Mandé, implored me to bring him with me, and if possible, to present him to M. Fouquet, so that... Well, it is not respectful towards Madame Vanel that her husband should run the risk of catching cold outside my house. Send for him, La Fontaine, since you know where he is. I will go myself. No jesting, said Fouquet, seriously. Let the business be a serious one, if it is to be one at all. But first of all, let us show we are hospitable. Make my apologies, La Fontaine, to M. Vanel, and tell him how distressed I am to have kept him waiting, but that I was not aware he was there. La Fontaine set off at once, fortunately accompanied by Gourville, for, absorbed in his own calculations, the poet would have mistaken a route, and was hurrying as fast as he could towards the village of Saint-Mandé. Within a quarter of an hour afterwards, M. Vanel was introduced into the superintendent's cabinet, a description of which has already been given at the beginning of the story. When Fouquet saw him enter, he called Polisson and whispered a few words in his ear. Do not lose a single word of what I am going to say. Let all the silver and gold plate, together with my jewels of every description, be packed up in a carriage. You will take the black horses. The jeweler will accompany you, and you will postpone the supper until Madame de Belliere's arrival. Will it be necessary to inform Madame de Belliere of it? Said Polisson. No, that will be useless. I will do that. So, away with you, my dear friend. Vanel bowed lowly to the superintendent and was about to begin a speech. Do not trouble yourself, monsieur, said Fouquet politely. I am told you wish to purchase a post I hold. How much can you give me for it? It is for you, monseigneur, to fix the amount you require. I know that offers of purchase have already been made to you for it. Madame Vanel, I have been told, values it at 1,400,000 livres. Can you give me the money immediately? I have not the money with me, said Vanel, frightened almost by the unpretending simplicity, amounting to greatness, of the man, for he had expected disputes, difficulties, opposition of every kind. When will you be able to bring it? Whenever you please, monseigneur, for he began to be afraid that Fouquet was trifling with him. If it were not for the trouble you would have in returning to Paris, I would say at once. But we will arrange that the payment and the signature shall take place at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Adieu, Monsieur Vanel. Present my humblest respects to Madame Vanel, said Fouquet as he rose, upon which Vanel, who felt the blood rushing to his head, for he was quite confounded by his success, said seriously to the superintendent, Will you give me your word, monseigneur, upon this affair? Fouquet turned round his head, saying, "Pardieu, and you, monsieur?" Vanel hesitated, trembled all over, and at last finished by hesitatingly holding out his hand. Fouquet opened and nobly extended his own. This loyal hand lay for a moment in Vanel's most hypocritical palm, and he pressed in his own in order the better to convince himself of the compact. The superintendent gently disengaged his hand, as he again said, "Adieu," and then Vanel ran hastily to the door, hurried along the vestibule, and fled as quickly as he could. Chapter 47. Madame de Belliere's plate and diamonds. Fouquet had no sooner dismissed Vanel than he began to reflect for a few moments. A man never can do too much for the woman he has once loved. Marguerite wishes to be the wife of a procured general, and why not confer this pleasure upon her? And now that the most scrupulous and sensitive conscience will be unable to reproach me with anything, let my thoughts be bestowed on her who has shown so much devotion for me. Madame de Belliere ought to be there by this time, he said, as he turned towards the secret door. After he had locked himself in, he opened the subterranean passage and rapidly hastened towards a means of communicating between the house of Vincennes and his own residence. He had neglected to apprise his friend of his approach by ringing the bell, perfectly assured that she would never fail to be exact at the rendezvous, as, indeed, was the case, for she was already waiting. The noise the superintendent made aroused her. She ran to take from under the door the letter he had thrust there, and which simply said, "Come, Marquise, we are waiting supper for you." With her heart filled with happiness, Madame de Belliere ran to her carriage in the Avenue de Vincennes, and in a few minutes she was holding out her hand to Gourville, who was standing at the entrance, where, in order the better to please his master, he had stationed himself to watch her arrival. She had not observed that Fouquet's black horse arrived at the same time, all steaming and foam-flaked, having returned to Saint-Mandé with Polisson and the very jeweler to whom Madame de Belliere had sold her plate and her jewels. Polisson introduced the goldsmith into the cabinet, which Fouquet had not yet left. The superintendent thanked him for having been good enough to regard as a simple deposit in his hands the valuable property which he had every right to sell, and he cast his eyes on the total of the account, which amounted to 1,300,000 francs. Then, going for a few moments to his desk, he wrote an order for 1,400,000 francs, payable at sight, at his treasury, before 12 o'clock the next day. 100,000 francs profit, cried the goldsmith. "Oh, monseigneur, what generosity!" Nay, not so, monsieur," said Fouquet, touching him on the shoulder. "There are certain kindnesses which can never be repaid. This profit is only what you have earned, but the interest of your money still remains to be arranged." And, saying this, he unfastened from his sleeve a diamond button, which the goldsmith himself had often valued at 3,000 pistoles. "Take this," he said to the goldsmith, "in remembrance of me. Farewell, you are an honest man. And you, monseigneur," cried the goldsmith, completely overcome, "are the noblest man that ever lived." Fouquet let the worthy goldsmith pass out of the room by a secret door, and then went to receive Madame de Belliere, who was already surrounded by all the guests. The marquise was always beautiful, but now her loveliness was more dazzling than ever. "Do you not think, gentlemen," said Fouquet, "that Madame is more than usually beautiful this evening? And do you happen to know why?" "Because Madame is really the most beautiful of all women," said someone present. "No, but because she is the best. And yet, said the marquise, smiling, "and yet all the jewels which Madame is wearing this evening are nothing but false stones." At this remark, the marquise blushed most painfully. Oh, exclaimed all the guests, "that can very well be said of one who has the finest diamonds in Paris." "Well," said Fouquet to Polisson in a low tone. "Well, at last I have understood you," returned the latter, "and you have done exceedingly well." "Supper is ready, monseigneur," said Vadel, with majestic air and tone. The crowd of guests hurried, more quickly than is usually the case with ministerial entertainments, towards a banqueting room, where a magnificent spectacle presented itself. Upon the buffets, upon the side tables, upon the supper table itself, in the midst of flowers and light, glittered most dazzlingly the richest and most costly gold and silver plate that could possibly be seen, relics of those ancient magnificent productions of Florentine artists whom the Medici family patronized, sculptured chased, and molded for the purpose of holding flowers, at a time when gold existed still in France. These hidden marvels, which had been buried during the civil wars, timidly reappeared during intervals of that war of good taste called La Fronde, at a time when noblemen fighting against noblemen killed, but did not pillage each other. All the plate present had Madame de Bellaire's arms engraved upon it. "Look," cried La Fontaine, "here's AP and AB." But the most remarkable object present was the cover which Fouquet had assigned to the marquise. Near her was a pyramid of diamonds, sapphires, emeralds, antique cameos, sardonyx stones, carved by the old Greeks of Asia Minor, with mountings of Mysian gold, curious mosaics of ancient Alexandria, set in silver. Massive Egyptian bracelets lay heaped on a large plate of Palissy where, supported by a tripod of gilt bronze, sculptured by Benvenuto Cellini, the marquise turned pale as she recognized what she had never expected to see again. A profound silence fell on every one of the restless and excited guests. Fouquet did not even make a sign in dismissal of the richly liveried servants who crowded like bees round the huge buffets and other tables in the room. "Gentlemen," he said, "all this plate which you behold once belonged to Madame de Vallière, who, having observed one of her friends in great distress, sent all this gold and silver, together with the heap of jewels now before her, to her goldsmith. This noble conduct of devoted friend can well be understood by such friends as you. Happy indeed is that man who sees himself loved in such a manner. Let us drink to the health of Madame de Vallière." It was now the marquise's turn. She rose, pale and smiling, and as she held out her glass with a faltering hand, and her trembling fingers touched those of Fouquet, her look, full of love, found its mirror in that of her ardent and generous-hearted lover. Begun in this manner, the supper soon became a fete. No one tried to be witty, but no one failed in being so. La Fontaine forgot his Gournay wine, and allowed Vattel to reconcile him to the wines of the Rhone and those from the shores of Spain. The Abbé Fouquet became so kind and good-natured that Gourville said to him, "Take care, Monsieur Abbé. If you are so tender, you will be carved and eaten." The hours passed away so joyously that, contrary to his usual custom, the superintendent did not leave the table before the end of the dessert. He smiled upon his friends, delighted as a man is whose heart becomes intoxicated before his head, and, for the first time, looked at the clock. Suddenly a carriage rolled into the courtyard, and, strange to say, it was heard high above the noise of the mirth which prevailed. Fouquet listened attentively, and then turned his eyes towards the antechamber. It seemed as if he could hear a step passing across it, a step that, instead of pressing the ground, weighed heavily upon a heart. "M. D'Herblay, Bishop of Un," the usher announced. Chapter 48. M. The Mazarin's Receipt. "Monseigneur," replied Aramis respectfully, "I will begin by begging you to excuse me for having interrupted this merry meeting, and then I will beg you to give me, as soon as your pleasure is attended to, a moment's audience on matters of business." As the word business had aroused the attention of some of the Epicureans present, Fouquet rose, saying, "Business first of all, Monsieur d'Herblay. We are too happy when matters of business arrive only at the end of a meal." As he said this, he took the hand of Madame de Bellière, who looked at him with a kind of uneasiness, and then led her to an adjoining salon, after having recommended her to the most reasonable of his guests. And then, taking Aramis by the arm, he led him towards his cabinet. As soon as Aramis was there, throwing aside the respectful air he had assumed, he threw himself into a chair, saying, "Guess whom I have seen this evening? My dear Chevalier. Every time you begin in that manner, I am sure to hear you announce something disagreeable." "Well, and this time you will not be mistaken, either, my dear friend," replied Aramis. "Well, then, I have seen Madame de Chevreuse." "The old Duchesse, do you mean?" "Yes." No, the old she-wolf herself. "Without teeth?" "Possibly, but not without claws." "Madame de Chevreuse knows very well that you are not avaricious, since she wishes to draw some money of you." "Indeed? Under what pretext?" "Oh, pretexts are never wanting with her. Let me tell you what is. It seems that the Duchesse has a good many letters of M. de Mazarines in her possession, I am not surprised at that, for the prelate was gallant enough. Yes, but these letters have nothing whatever to do with the prelate's love affairs. They concern, it is said, financial matters rather, and accordingly they are less interesting. Not at all. Have you never heard speak of a prosecution being instituted for an embezzlement or appropriation rather of public funds? Yes, 100, nay, 1,000 times. Ever since I have been engaged in public matters, I have hardly heard of anything else. It is precisely your own case, when, as a bishop, people reproach you for impiety, or, as a musketeer, for your cowardice. The very thing which they are always accusing ministers of finance is the embezzlement of public funds. Very good. But take a particular instance, for the Duchess asserts that M. de Mazarin alludes to certain particular instances. What are they? Something like a sum of 13 millions of francs, of which it would be very difficult for you to define the precise nature of the employment. 13 millions, said the superintendent, stretching himself in his armchair, in order to enable him more comfortably to look up towards the ceiling. 13 millions. I am trying to remember out of all those I have been accused of having stolen. Do not laugh, my dear monsieur, for it is very serious. It is positive that the Duchess has certain letters in her possession, and that these letters must be as she represents them, since she wished to sell them to me for 500,000 francs. Oh, one can have a very tolerable calumny got up for such a sum as that, replied Fouquet. Ah, now I know what you mean, and he began to laugh very heartily. I remember the story of those 13 millions now. Yes, I remember them quite well. I am delighted to hear it. Tell me about them. Well, then, one day Signor Mazarin, heaven rest his soul, made a profit of 13 millions upon a concession of lands in the Valtelline. He canceled them in the registry of receipts, sent them to me, and then made me advance them to him for war expenses. Very good. Then there is no doubt of their proper destination. No, the cardinal made me invest them in my own name and gave me a receipt. You have the receipt? Of course, said Fouquet, as he quietly rose from his chair and went to his large ebony bureau inlaid with mother of pearl and gold. What I most admire in you, said Aramis, with an air of great satisfaction, is your memory in the first place, then your self-possession, and finally, the perfect order which prevails in your administration. You of all men, too, who are by nature a poet. Yes, said Fouquet, I am orderly out of the spirit of idleness, to save myself the trouble of looking after things, and so I know that Mazarin's receipt is in the third drawer under the letter M. I open the drawer and place my hand upon the very paper I need. In the night, without a light, I could find it, and with a confident hand, he felt the bundle of papers which were piled up in the open drawer. Nay, more than that, he continued. I remember the paper as if I saw it. It is thick, somewhat crumpled, with gilt edges. Mazarin had made a blot upon the figure of the date. Ah, he said, the paper knows we are talking about it, and that we want it very much, and so it hides itself out of the way. And as the superintendent looked into the drawer, Aramis rose from his seat. This is very singular, said Fouquet. Your memory is treacherous, my dear Monseigneur. Look in another drawer. Fouquet took out the bundle of papers and turned them over once more. He then grew very pale. Don't confine your search to that drawer, said Aramis. Look elsewhere. Quite useless. I have never made a mistake. No one but myself arranges any papers of mine of this nature. No one but myself ever opens this drawer, of which, besides, no one, myself excepted, is aware of the secret. What do you conclude, then? Said Aramis, agitated. That Mazarin's receipt has been stolen from me. Madame de Chevreuse was right. Chevalier, I have appropriated the public funds. I have robbed the state coffers of 13 millions of money. I am a thief, Monsieur d'Herblay. Nay, do not get irritated. Do not get excited. And why not, Chevalier? Surely there is every reason for it. If legal proceedings are well arranged and a judgment given in accordance with them, your friend the superintendent will soon follow Montfaucon, his colleague in Guerin de Marigny, and his predecessor, Semblançay. Oh, said Aramis, smiling, not so fast as that. And why not? Why not so fast? What do you suppose Madame de Chevreuse has done with those letters? For you refuse them, I suppose. Yes, at once. I suppose that she went and sold them to M. Colbert. Well, I said I suppose so. I might have said I was sure of it, for I had her followed, and when she left me, she returned to her own house, went out by a back door, and proceeded straight to the intendant's house in the Rue Croix de Petit Champs. Legal proceedings will be instituted. Then scandal and dishonor will follow, and all will fall upon me like a thunderbolt, blindly, pitilessly. Aramis approached Fouquet, who sat trembling in his chair, close to the open drawers. He placed his hand on his shoulder, and in an affectionate tone of voice said, "Do not forget that the position of M. Fouquet can in no way be compared to that of Semblanque or of Marigny. And why not, in heaven's name? Because the proceedings against those ministers were determined, completed, and the sentence carried out, whilst in your case the same thing cannot take place. Another blow, why not? A peculator is, under any circumstances, a criminal. Criminals who know how to find a safe asylum are never in danger. What? Make my escape? Fly? No, I do not mean that. You forget that all such proceedings originate in the Parliament, that they are instituted by the Procureur General, and that you are the Procureur General. You see that, unless you wish to condemn yourself." "Oh!" cried Fouquet, suddenly, dashing his fist upon the table. "Well, what is the matter? I am Procureur General no longer." Aramis, at this reply, became as livid as death. He pressed his hands together convulsively, and with a wild, haggard look, which almost annihilated Fouquet, he said, laying a stress on every distinct syllable, "You are Procureur General no longer, do you say?" "No." "Since when?" "Since the last 4 or 5 hours." "Take care," interrupted Aramis coldly. "I do not think you are in the full possession of your senses, my friend. Collect yourself." "I tell you," returned Fouquet, "that a little while ago, someone came to me, brought by my friends, to offer me 1,400,000 francs for the appointment, and that I sold it." Aramis looked as though he had been struck by lightning. The intelligent and mocking expression of his countenance assumed an aspect of such profound gloom and terror that it had more effect upon the superintendent than all the exclamations and speeches in the world. "You had need of money, then," he said, at last. "Yes, to discharge a debt of honor." And in a few words, he gave Aramis an account of Madame de Belliere's generosity, and the manner in which he thought it but right to discharge that act of generosity. "Yes," said Aramis, "that is indeed a fine trait. What has it cost?" "Exactly the 1,400,000 francs, the price of my appointment, which you received in that manner, without reflection. Oh, imprudent man! I have not yet received the amount, but I shall tomorrow. It is not yet completed, then? It must be carried out, though, for I have given the goldsmith, for 12 o'clock tomorrow, an order upon my treasury, into which the purchaser's money will be paid at 6 or 7 o'clock. "Heaven be praised!" cried Aramis, clapping his hands together. "Nothing is yet completed, since you have not yet been paid. But the goldsmith? You shall receive the 1,400,000 francs from me at a quarter before 12. Stay a moment. It is at 6 o'clock this very morning that I am to sign." "Oh, I will answer that you do not sign. If you have given it, you will take it back again, that is all." "Can I believe what I hear?" cried Fouquet in a most expressive tone. Fouquet recalled his word, after it has once been pledged. Aramis replied to the almost stern look of the minister by a look full of anger. "Monsieur," he said, "I believe I have deserved to be called a man of honor. As a soldier, I have risked my life 500 times. As a priest, I have rendered still greater services, both to the state and to my friends. The value of a word, once passed, is estimated according to the worth of the man who gives it. So long as it is in his own keeping, it is of the purest, finest gold. When his wish to keep it has passed away, it is a two-edged sword. With that word, therefore, he defends himself as with an honorable weapon, considering that, when he disregards his word, he endangers his life and incurs an amount of risk far greater than that which his adversary is likely to derive of profit. In such a case, monsieur, he appeals to heaven and to justice. And so you are determined to sign the sale of the very appointment which can alone defend you against all your enemies." "Yes, I shall sign." "You will deliver yourself up then bound hand and foot from a false notion of honor, which the most scrupulous casuist would disdain? I shall sign, repeated Fouquet. Aramis sighed deeply, and looked all round him with the impatient gesture of a man who would gladly dash something to pieces, as a relief to his feelings. We have still one means left, he said, and I trust you will not refuse me to make use of that. I know nothing more loyal than the renunciation of your purchaser. Is he a friend of yours? Certainly, but if you allow me to manage the affair, I do not despair. Whom are you in treaty with? What manner of man is it? I am not aware whether you know the Parliament. Most of its members. One of the presidents, perhaps? No, only a counselor of the name of Vanel. Aramis became perfectly purple. Vanel, he cried, rising abruptly from his seat. Vanel, the husband of Marguerite Vanel? Exactly. Of your former mistress? Yes, my dear fellow. She is anxious to be the wife of the Procureur General. I certainly owed poor Vanel that slight concession, and I am a gainer by it, since I, at the same time, can confer a pleasure on his wife. Aramis walked straight up to Fouquet and took hold of his hand. Do you know, he said very calmly, the name of Madame Vanel's new lover? Ah, she has a new lover, then? I was not aware of it. No, I have no idea what his name is. His name is M. Jean-Baptiste Colbert. He is intendant of the finances. He lives in the Rue Croix de Petit Champs, where Madame de Chevreuse has been this evening to take him Mazarin's letters, which he wishes to sell. Gracious heaven, murmured Fouquet, passing his hand across his forehead, from which the perspiration was starting. That I am utterly lost, yes. Do you now think it worth while to be so scrupulous with regard to keeping your word? Yes, said Fouquet. These obstinate people always contrive matters in such a way that one cannot but admire them all the while, murmured Aramis. Fouquet held out his hand to him, and at the very moment, a richly ornamented tortoiseshell clock, supported by golden figures, which was standing on a console table opposite to the fireplace, struck 6. The sound of a door being opened in the vestibule was heard, and Gourville came to the door of the cabinet to inquire if Fouquet would receive M. Vanel. Fouquet turned his eyes from the gaze of Aramis, and then desired that M. Vanel should be shown in. Chapter 49. Monsieur Colbert's Rough Draft. Vanel, who entered at this stage of the conversation, was nothing less for Aramis and Fouquet than the full stop which completes a phrase. But for Vanel, Aramis's presence in Fouquet's cabinet had quite another signification, and therefore, at his first step in the room, he paused as he looked at the delicate yet firm features of the Bishop of Vannes, and his look of astonishment soon became one of scrutinizing attention. As for Fouquet, a perfect politician, that is to say, complete master of himself, he had already, by the energy of his own resolute will, contrived to remove from his face all traces of the emotion which Aramis's revelation had occasioned. He was no longer, therefore, a man overwhelmed by misfortune and reduced to resort to expedients. He held his head proudly erect and indicated by a gesture that Vanel could enter. He was now the first minister of the state, and in his own palace. Aramis knew the superintendent well. The delicacy of the feelings of his heart and the exalted nature of his mind no longer surprised him. He confined himself, then, for the moment, intending to resume later an active part in the conversation, to the performance of the difficult part of man who looks on and listens, in order to learn and understand. Vanel was visibly overcome, and advanced into the middle of the cabinet, bowing to everything and everybody. I am here, he said. You are punctual, Monsieur Vanel, returned Fouquet. In matters of business, Monseigneur, replied Vanel. I look upon exactitude as a virtue. No doubt, monsieur. I beg your pardon, interrupted Aramis, indicating Vanel with his finger, but addressing himself to Fouquet. This is a gentleman, I believe, who has come about the purchase of your appointment? Yes, I am, replied Vanel, astonished at the extremely haughty tone in which Aramis had put the question. But in what way am I to address you, who do me the honor? Call me Monseigneur, replied Aramis, dryly. Vanel bowed. Come, gentlemen, a truce to these ceremonies. Let us proceed to the matter itself. Monseigneur sees, said Vanel, that I am waiting your pleasure. On the contrary, I am waiting, replied Fouquet. What for? May I be permitted to ask, Monseigneur? I thought that you had perhaps something to say. Oh, said Vanel to himself, he has reflected on the matter, and I am lost. But resuming his courage, he continued, No, Monseigneur, nothing, absolutely nothing more than what I said to you yesterday, and which I am again ready to repeat to you now. So important, indeed, said Fouquet, that I have reflected. You have been reflecting, do you say, Monseigneur? Exclaimed Vanel anxiously. Yes, that you might not yet be in a position to purchase. Oh, Monseigneur, do not make yourself uneasy on that score, Monsieur Vanel. I shall not blame you for a failure in your word, which evidently may arise from inability on your part. Oh, yes, Monseigneur, you would blame me, and you would be right in doing so, said Vanel. For man must either be very imprudent or a fool to undertake engagements which he cannot keep, and I, at least, have always regarded a thing agreed on as a thing actually carried out. Fouquet colored, while Aramis uttered a hum of impatience. You would be wrong to exaggerate such notions as those, monsieur, said the superintendent, for a man's mind is variable, and full of these very excusable caprices, which are, however, sometimes estimable enough, and a man may have wished for something yesterday of which he repents today. Yesterday I wished to sell. Monseigneur did more than wish to sell. He actually sold. Well, that may be so. But today I ask you the favor to restore me my word which I pledged you. I received your word as a satisfactory assurance that it would be kept. I know that, and that is the reason why I now entreat you. Do you understand me? I entreat you to restore it to me. Fouquet suddenly paused. The words, I entreat you, the effect of which he did not immediately perceive, seemed almost to choke him as he uttered it. Aramis, still playing with his knife, fixed a look upon Vanel, which seemed as if he wished to penetrate the recesses of his heart. Vanel simply bowed, as he said, I am overcome, Monseigneur, at the honor you do me to consult me upon a matter of business which is already completed. But, alas, Monseigneur, you see, he said, as he opened a large pocketbook, I have brought the money with me. The whole sum, I mean, and here, Monseigneur, is the contract of sale which I had just effected of a property belonging to my wife. The order is authentic in every particular. The necessary signatures have been attached to it, and it is made payable at sight. It is ready money, in fact, and, in one word, the whole affair is complete. My dear Monsieur Vanel, there is not a matter of business in this world, however important it may be, which cannot be postponed in order to oblige a man, who, by that means, might and would be made a devoted friend. Certainly, said Vanel, awkwardly. Vanel preserved a perfect silence. In the meantime, Aramis had continued his close observation of the man. Vanel's narrow face, his deeply sunken eyes, his arched eyebrows, had revealed to the bishop of the type of an avaricious and ambitious character. Aramis's method was to oppose one passion by another. He saw that Fouquet was defeated, morally subdued, and so he came to his rescue with fresh weapons in his hands. Excuse me, Monseigneur, he said. You forgot to show Vanel that his own interests are diametrically opposed to this renunciation of the sale. Vanel looked at the bishop with astonishment. He had hardly expected to find an auxiliary in him. Fouquet also paused to listen to the bishop. Do you not see, continued Aramis, that Vanel, in order to purchase your appointment, has been obliged to sell a property belonging to his wife? Well, that is no slight matter, for one cannot displace, as he has done, 14 or 1,500,000 francs without some considerable loss and very serious inconvenience. Perfectly true, said Vanel, whose secret Aramis had, with keen-sighted gaze, wrung from the bottom of his heart. Inconveniences such as these are matters of great expense and calculation, and whenever a man has money matters to deal with, the expenses are generally the very first thing thought of. Yes, said Fouquet, who began to understand Aramis's meaning. Vanel remained perfectly silent. He, too, had understood him. Aramis observed his coldness of manner and his silence. Very good, he said to himself. You are waiting, I see, until you know the amount. But do not fear, I shall send you such a flight of crowns that you cannot but capitulate on the spot. We must offer M. Vanel 100,000 crowns at once, said Fouquet, carried away by his generous feelings. The sum was a good one. A prince, even, would have been satisfied with such a bonus. 100,000 crowns, at that period, was the dowry of a king's daughter. Vanel, however, did not move. He is a perfect rascal, thought the bishop. Well, we must offer 500,000 francs at once. And he made a sign to Fouquet accordingly. You seem to have spent more than that, dear Monsieur Vanel, said the superintendent. The price of ready money is enormous. You must have made a great sacrifice in selling your wife's property. Well, what can I have been thinking of? I ought to have offered to sign you an order for 500,000 francs, and even in that case I shall feel that I am greatly indebted to you. There was not a gleam of delight or desire on Vanel's face, which remained perfectly impassible. Not a muscle of it changed in the slightest degree. Aramis cast a look almost of despair at Fouquet, and then, going straight up to Vanel and taking hold of him by the coat, in a familiar manner, he said, Monsieur Vanel, it is neither the inconvenience, nor the displacement of your money, nor the sale of your wife's property even, that you are thinking of at this moment. It is something more important still. I can well understand it. So pay particular attention to what I am going to say. Yes, Monseigneur, Vanel replied, beginning to tremble in every limb, as the prelate's eyes seemed almost ready to devour him. I offer you, therefore, in the superintendent's name, not 300,000 livres, nor 500,000, but 1,000,000. 1,000,000. Do you understand me? He added, as he shook him nervously. 1,000,000, repeated Vanel, as pale as death. 1,000,000. In other words, at the present rate of interest, an income of 70,000 francs. Come, monsieur, said Fouquet. You can hardly refuse that. Answer, do you accept? Impossible, murmured Vanel. Aramis bit his lips, and something like a cloud seemed to pass over his face. The thunder behind this cloud could easily be imagined. He still kept his hold on Vanel. You have purchased the appointment for 1,500,000 francs, I think. Well, you will receive these 1,500,000 francs back again by paying M. Fouquet a visit and shaking hands with him on the bargain. You will become a gainer of 1.5 million. You get honor and profit at the same time, Monsieur Vanel. I cannot do it, said Vanel, hoarsely. Very well, replied Aramis, who had grasped Vanel so tightly by the coat that, when he let go his hold, Vanel staggered back a few paces. Very well. One can now see clearly enough your object in coming here. Yes, said Fouquet, one can easily see that. But, said Vanel, attempting to stand erect before the weakness of these two men of honor. Does the fellow presume to speak? Said Aramis, with the tone of an emperor. Fellow, repeated Vanel. The scoundrel, I meant to say, added Aramis, who had now resumed his usual self-possession. Come, monsieur, produce your deed of sale. You have it about you, I suppose, in one of your pockets, already prepared, as an assassin holds his pistol or his dagger concealed under his cloak. Enough, cried Fouquet. Where is this deed? Vanel tremblingly searched in his pockets, and as he drew out his pocketbook, a paper fell out of it, while Vanel offered the other to Fouquet. Aramis pounced upon the paper which had fallen out, as soon as he recognized the handwriting. I beg your pardon, said Vanel. That is a rough draft of the deed. Vanel, completely humiliated, seemed as if he were looking for some hole wherein to hide himself. Well, said Aramis, if your name were not Fouquet, and if your enemy's name were not Colbert, if you had not this mean thief before you, I should say to you, repudiate it. Such a proof as this absolves you from your word, but these fellows would think you were afraid. They would fear you less than they do. Therefore sign the deed at once. And he held out a pen towards him. Fouquet pressed Aramis's hand, but instead of the deed which Vanel handed him, he took the rough draft of it. No, not that paper, said Aramis hastily. This is the one. The other is too precious a document for you to part with. No, no, replied Fouquet. I will sign under M. Colbert's own handwriting even, and I write, the handwriting is approved of. He then signed and said, Here it is, Monsieur Vanel. And the latter seized the paper, dashed down the money, and was about to make his escape. "One moment," said Aramis. "Are you quite sure the exact amount is there?" "It ought to be counted over, Monsieur Vanel. Particularly since M. Colbert makes presents of money to ladies, I see. Ah, that worthy M. Colbert is not so generous as M. Fouquet. And Aramis, spelling every word, every letter of the order to pay, distilled his wrath and his contempt, drop by drop, upon the miserable wretch who had to submit to this torture for a quarter of an hour. He was then dismissed, not in words, but by a gesture, as one dismisses or discharges a beggar or a menial. As soon as Vanel had gone, the minister and the prelate, their eyes fixed on each other, remained silent for a few moments. "Well," said Aramis, the first to break the silence, "to what can that man be compared, who, at the very moment he is on the point of entering into a conflict with an enemy armed from head to foot, panting for his life, presents himself at the contest utterly defenseless, throws down his arms, and smiles and kisses his hands to his adversary in the most gracious manner? Good faith, M. Fouquet, is a weapon which scoundrels frequently make use of against men of honor, and it answers their purpose. Men of honor ought, in their turn, also to make use of dishonest means against such scoundrels. You would soon see how strong they would become, without ceasing to be men of honor." "What they did would be termed the act of a scoundrel," replied Fouquet. "Far from that. It would be merely coquetting or play with the truth. At all events, since you have finished with this Vanel, since you have deprived yourself of the happiness of confounding him by repudiating your word, and since you have given up, for the purpose of being used against yourself, the only weapon which can ruin you." "My dear friend," said Fouquet mournfully, "you are like the teacher of philosophy whom La Fontaine was telling us about the other day. He saw a child drowning, and began to read him a lecture divided into 3 heads. Aramis smiled as he said, "Philosophy, yes. Teacher, yes. A drowning child, yes. But a child could be saved, you shall see. But first of all, let us talk about business. Did you not some time ago," he continued, as Fouquet looked at him with a bewildered air, "speak to me about an idea you had of giving a fete at Vaux?" "Oh," said Fouquet, "that was when affairs were flourishing." "No, no, my dear prelate, a fete to which M. Colbert advised the king to invite himself." "Ah, exactly, as it would be a fete of so costly a character that you would be ruined in giving it." "Precisely so. In happier days, as I said just now, I had a kind of pride in showing my enemies how inexhaustible my resources were. I felt it a point of honor to strike them with amazement, by creating millions under circumstances where they imagined nothing but bankruptcies and failures would follow. But at present, I am arranging my accounts with the state, with the king, with myself, and I must now become a mean, stingy man. I shall be able to prove to the world that I can act or operate with my deniers as I used to do with my bags of pistoles. And from tomorrow my equipages shall be sold, my mansions mortgaged, my expenses curtailed." "From tomorrow," interrupted Aramis quietly, "you will occupy yourself, without the slightest delay, with your fete at Vaux, which must hereafter be spoken of as one of the most magnificent productions of your most prosperous days." "Aye, do you think so?" "What do you mean, then? Do you not know that a fete at Vaux, one of the very simplest possible character, would cost 4 or 5 millions? I do not speak of fete of the very simplest possible character, my dear superintendent. Just so. It ought to be on a scale of the most unbounded magnificence." "Chevalier, Chevalier," said Fouquet, giddy with amazement, "whither are you hurrying me?" "Across the gulf into which you were about to fall," replied the Bishop of Vannes. "Take hold of my cloak, and throw fear aside. Why did you not tell me that sooner, Aramis? There was a day when, with 1 million only, you could have saved me, whilst today I can give you 20, said the prelate. "Such is the case, however. The reason is very simple. On the day you speak of, I had not the million which you had need of at my disposal, whilst now I can easily procure the 20 millions we require. May heaven hear you and save me." "I abandon myself to you unreservedly," Fouquet murmured. "No, no, I do not understand it in that manner. I am unreservedly devoted to you. Therefore, as you have the clearest, the most delicate, and the most ingenious mind of the two, you shall have entire control over fate, even to the very smallest details. Only, said Fouquet, as a man accustomed to understand and appreciate the value of a parenthesis. Well then, leaving the entire invention of the details to you, I shall reserve to myself a general superintendence over the execution. In what way? I mean, that you will make of me, on that day, a major domo, a sort of inspector general or factotum, something between a captain of the guard and manager or steward. I will look after people and will keep the keys of the doors. You will give your orders, of course, but will give them to no one but me. They will pass through my lips, to reach those for whom they are intended. You understand? No, I am very far from understanding. But you agree? Of course, my friend. That is all I care about, then. Thanks. And now go and prepare your list of invitations. Whom shall I invite? Everybody you know. Chapter 50, in which the author thinks it is high time to return to the Vicomte of Bragelonne. Our readers will have observed in this story the adventures of the new and of the past generation being detailed, as it were, side by side. He will have noticed in the former the reflection of the glory of earlier years, the experience of the bitter things of this world. In the former, also, that peace which takes possession of the heart, and that healing of the scars which were formerly deep and painful wounds. In the latter, the conflicts of love and vanity, bitter disappointments, ineffable delights, life instead of memory. If, therefore, any variety has been presented to the reader in the different episodes of this tale, it is to be attributed to the numerous shades of color which are presented on this double tablet, where two pictures are seen side by side, mingling and harmonizing their severe and pleasing tones. The repose of the emotions of one is found in harmonious contrast with the fiery sentiments of the other. After having talked reason with older heads, one loves to talk nonsense with youth. Therefore, if the threads of the story do not seem very intimately to connect the chapter we are now writing with the one we have just written, we do not intend to give ourselves any more thought or trouble about it than Royce took in painting an autumn sky after having finished a springtime scene. We accordingly resume Raoul de Bragelonne's story at the very place where our last sketch left him. In a state of frenzy and dismay, or rather without power or will of his own, hardly knowing what he was doing, he fled swiftly after the scene in La Valliere's chamber, that strange exclusion, Louise's grief, Montalise's terror, the king's wrath, all seemed to indicate some misfortune. But what? He had arrived from London because he had been told of the existence of a danger, and almost on his arrival this appearance of danger was manifest. Was not this sufficient for a lover? Certainly it was, but it was insufficient for a pure and upright heart such as his. And yet Raoul did not seek for explanations in the very quarter where more jealous or less timid lovers would have done. He did not go straightway to his mistress and say, "Louise, is it true that you love me no longer? Is it true that you love another?" Full of courage, full of friendship as he was full of love, a religious observer of his word, and believing blindly the word of others, Raoul said within himself, "Gueche wrote to put me on my guard. Gueche knows something. I will go and ask Gueche what he knows and tell him what I have seen." The journey was not a long one. Gueche, who had been brought from Fontainebleau to Paris within the last 2 days, was beginning to recover from his wounds and to walk about a little in his room. He uttered a cry of joy as he saw Raoul, with the eagerness of friendship, enter the apartment. Raoul was unable to refrain from a cry of grief when he saw de Guiche, so pale, so thin, so melancholy. A very few words, and a simple gesture which de Guiche made to put aside Raoul's arm, were sufficient to inform the latter of the truth. "Ah, so it is," said Raoul, seating himself beside his friend. "One loves and dies." No, not dies," replied Guiche, smiling, "since I am now recovering, and since, too, I can press you in my arms." "Ah, I understand. And I understand you, too. You fancy I am unhappy, Raoul? Alas! No, I am the happiest of men. My body suffers, but not my mind or my heart. If you only knew, oh, I am, indeed, the very happiest of men." "So much the better," said Raoul. "So much the better, provided it lasts." "It is over." I have had enough happiness to last me to my dying day, Raoul. I have no doubt you have had. But she... Listen, I love her but you are not listening to me. I beg your pardon. Your mind is preoccupied. Yes, your health in the first place. It is not that, I know. My dear friend, you will be wrong. I think, to ask me any questions, you of all persons in the world. And he laid so much weight upon the you that he completely enlightened his friend upon the nature of the evil and the difficulty of remedying it. You say that, Raoul, on account of what I wrote to you. My dear friend, I am entirely at your service. Thank you. I have hurried. I have flown here. I came in half the time the government couriers usually take. Now tell me, my dear friend, what did you want? Nothing whatever, but to make you come. Well, then I am here. All is quite right, then. There must have been something else, I suppose? No, indeed. Upon my honor, you cannot possibly have crushed all my hopes so violently, or have exposed me being disgraced by the king for my return, which is in disobedience of his orders. You cannot, I say, have planted jealousy in my heart, merely to say to me, it is all right, be perfectly easy. I do not say to you, Raoul, be perfectly easy, but pray understand me. I never will, nor can I indeed, tell you anything else. What sort of person do you take me for? What do you mean? If you know anything, why conceal it from me? If you do not know anything, why did you write so warningly? True. I was very wrong, and I regret having done so, Raoul. It seems nothing to write to a friend and say, come. But to have this friend face to face, to feel him tremble and breathlessly and anxiously wait to hear what one hardly dare tell him, is very difficult. Dare! I have courage enough. If you have not, exclaimed Raoul in despair. See how unjust you are, and how soon you forget you have to do with a poor wounded fellow, such as your unhappy friend is. So, calm yourself, Raoul. I said to you, come, you are here, so ask me nothing further. Your object in telling me to come was your hope that I should see with my own eyes, was it not? Nay, do not hesitate, for I have seen all. Oh! Exclaimed de Guiche. Or at least I thought. There, now you see you are not sure. But if you have any doubt, my poor friend, what remains for me to do? I saw Louise much agitated, Montali's in a state of bewilderment, the king. The king? Yes. You turn your head aside. The danger is there, the evil is there. Tell me, is it not so? Is it not the king? I say nothing. Oh, you say 1,000 times more than nothing. Give me facts, for pity's sake, give me proofs. My friend, the only friend I have, speak, tell me all. My heart is crushed, wounded to death. I am dying from despair. If that really be so, as I see it is, indeed, dear Raoul, replied de Guiche, you relieve me from my difficulty, and I will tell you all, perfectly sure that I can tell you nothing but what is consoling, compared to despair from which I see you suffering. Go on, I am listening. Well, then, I can only tell you what you might learn from every one you meet. From every one, do you say? It is talked about, then. Before you say people talk about it, learn what it is that people have to talk about. I assure you solemnly that people only talk about what may in truth be very innocent. Perhaps a walk. A walk with the king. Yes, certainly, a walk with the king. And I believe the king has already very frequently before taken walks with ladies, without on that account. You would not have written to me, shall I say again, if there had been nothing unusual in this promenade. I know that while the storm lasted, it would have been far better if the king had taken shelter somewhere else than to have remained with his head uncovered before La Vallière. But the king is so very courteous and polite. Oh, de Guiche, you are killing me. Do not let us talk any more, then. Nay, let us continue. This walk was followed by others, I suppose? No. I mean, yes, there was the adventure of the oak, I think. But I know nothing about the matter at all. Raoul rose. De Guiche endeavored to imitate him, notwithstanding his weakness. Well, I will not add another word. I have said either too much or not enough. Let others give you further information if they will, or if they can. My duty was to warn you, and that I have done. Watch over your own affairs now, yourself. Question others. Alas, you are no true friend to speak to me in that manner, said the young man, in utter distress. The first man I meet may be either evilly disposed or a fool. If the former, he will tell me a lie to make me suffer more than I do now. If the latter, he will do worse still. Ah, de Guiche, before 2 hours are over, I shall have been told 10 falsehoods, and shall have as many duels on my hands. Save me, then, is it not best to know the worst always? But I know nothing, I tell you. I was wounded, attacked by fever, out of my senses, and I have only a very faint recollection of it all. But there is no reason why we should search very far, when the very man we want is close at hand. Is not D'Artagnan your friend? Oh, true. Got to him. Then he will be able to throw sufficient light upon the subject. At this moment a lackey entered the room. What is it? Said de Guiche. Someone is waiting for Monseigneur in the cabinet de porcelains. Very well. Will you excuse me, my dear Raoul? I am so proud since I have been able to walk again. I would offer you my arm, de Guiche, if I did not guess that the person in question is a lady. I believe so, said de Guiche, smiling as he quitted Raoul. Raoul remained motionless, absorbed in grief, overwhelmed, like the miner upon whom a vault has just fallen in, who, wounded, his life-blood welling fast, his thoughts confused, endeavors to recover himself, to save his life and to retain his reason. A few minutes were all Raoul needed to dissipate the bewildering sensations occasioned by these two revelations. He had already recovered the thread of his ideas, when, suddenly, through the door, he fancied he recognized Montalisa's voice in the cabinet de porcelains. She, he cried. Yes, it is indeed her voice. She will be able to tell me the whole truth. But shall I question her here? She conceals herself even from me. She is coming, no doubt, from Madame. I will see her in her own apartment. She will explain her alarm, her flight, the strange manner in which I was driven out. She will tell me all that, after M. D'Artagnan, who knows everything, shall have given me a fresh strength and courage. Madame, a coquette I fear, and yet a coquette who is herself in love, has her moment of kindness, a coquette who is as capricious and uncertain as life or death, but who tells de Guiche that he is the happiest of men. He at least is lying on roses. And so he hastily quitted the Comte's apartments, reproaching himself as he went for having talked of nothing but his own affairs to de Guiche, and soon reached D'Artagnan's quarters.